curling or something?
Curling has not officially started yet.
It's winter, Donna.
They do it in March. It started in March. It's actually March through May.
Well, you can recruit the Winter Olympics and nobody watches it on TV again. You can.
Hi, guys.
Hello, and welcome to the Francis Howell School District Board of Education meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to celebrate our successes and showcase our talented students and staff, as well as to conduct the business of the district, hear reports about progress on key initiatives, and listen to the community on important issues. The Francis Howell School District Board of Education is committed to the safety and security of all of our students, staff, parents, and patrons. We have reports to consider and business to conduct that are critical to the function of our school district. We want to remind all of our visitors that we expect the audience to remain civil and respectful at all times as the board conducts its business. Calling out verbal aggressiveness, inappropriate language, or name calling is not acceptable. If the meeting becomes unruly, the board may take a recess until such time the audience is appropriate. If inappropriate behavior continues by individuals, they will be asked to leave the meeting. If the audience becomes so inappropriate in their behavior that we cannot conduct our business, the board reserves the right to adjourn the meeting. We appreciate your cooperation and that you took the time to attend tonight's meeting. We will open this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Board, I would like a motion to approve the agenda for January 20th, 2022 as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now have our special recognitions. Ms. Jen Joles.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. For our first recognition, I'd like to invite Dr. Jesse Altman to the podium.
Good evening, board. I'm excited to be here tonight to announce our 9 teachers in the district that have earned or renewed their national board certification. the highest credential in the teaching profession. The district now has 52 teachers who have achieved this distinction. National Board certified teachers are highly accomplished educators who meet high and rigorous standards. Like board certified doctors and accountants, teachers who receive National Board certification have met stringent standards through intensive study, expert evaluation, self-assessment, and peer review. The certification is a voluntary process in which teachers work to advance the quality of teaching and learning. And these amazing educators did it all while teaching during a pandemic. We would like to congratulate 3 educators as our newest National Board certified teachers in the district. Ryan McCoy is a science teacher at Francis Howell Central. He has been teaching and in Francis Howell for 26 years. Our next 2 certified teachers could not be with us tonight, but we're going to recognize them through the live stream. Courtney Flam is an art teacher at Francis Howell North High School who's been teaching for 9 years and in Francis Howell for 5 years. Congratulations. Tracy Happy is a 3rd grade teacher at Henderson Elementary. She's been teaching for 17 years and in Francis Howell for 9 years. Congrats to these 3 amazing educators. A National Board teaching certificate is valid for 10 years with the opportunity to renew certification. Renewal is a personal and public statement about a teacher's commitment to the profession and to their students. Accomplished teachers recognize that their professional learning and growth never ends. In any given subject and area, best practice and knowledge are constantly evolving. At the same time, changes in technology and policy affect every aspect of education. Francis Howell has 6 National Board certified teachers who have recently renewed their certification. LaWanda Brewer is a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing at Becky David Elementary. She's been teaching for 24 years and in Francis Howell for 20 years. Congratulations. Michelle Ridlin is an art teacher at Francis Howell Central and serves as the district's fine arts teacher leader. She's been teaching for 21 years in Francis Howell. Congrats, Michelle. Sarah White is a family and consumer science teacher at Francis Howell North High School, and she's been in education for 20 years. Congratulations, Sarah. We have 3 educators who could not be with us this evening that are also being recognized through the live stream. Lori Fay is an AP English teacher at Francis Howell Central High School. She's been teaching for 20 years and in Francis Howell for 14 years. Congrats to Lori. Kathy Conwell is a school counselor at Becky David Elementary. She's been in Francis Howell for 21 years. Congratulations, Kathy. And finally, congratulations to Susan Niederberg. She's a science teacher at Barnwell Middle School. She's been teaching for 20 years and in Francis Howell for 15 years. A big congratulations to all of these amazing educators on such a huge accomplishment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Altman. Next, we'd like to recognize a Howell High student who sprang into action when his community needed him most. 16-year-old Donnie McLeod runs the New Melly 411 Facebook page. When an EF3 tornado struck his hometown on December 10th, Donnie quickly mobilized volunteers and helped collect donations for storm victims, including food, water, gift cards, clothes, and other necessities. In fact, the community response was so overwhelming, donations had to be turned away because there was no space left to store the items. Here to tell you a little bit more about Donnie is Francis Howell High Principal Dr. Dave Wedlock.
So as you just heard, Donnie is an extraordinary high school student. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Donnie. He's currently a junior since he was a freshman. When he had started the Facebook page, New Melody 411, just as a way to match community needs with community resources. Fortunately or unfortunately, just a couple months after he started the page, the global pandemic hit. And the needs for resources and community support were never greater. That started a conversation between Donnie and I about those topics, which extended this year as he helped organize a Veterans Parade in New Melody to honor military service, and as you just heard, his extraordinary efforts in stepping in to the tornado disaster. What impresses me most about Donnie, however, is not these extraordinary efforts. I mean, he began this as a high school freshman. I don't know how many of us at that age were thinking about community resources and matching resources with people in need. And so we sat down and really talked about it, and what Donnie told me really touched my heart. And that was that when Donnie was in 3rd grade at Daniel Boone Elementary, enjoying milk cartons at lunch and recess on the playground, his grandfather was experiencing brain cancer. And during this battle for his life, ended up in Donnie's family home. And through that time, Donnie participated in his care, supported him, and really loved his grandfather through the end of his life. And through that process, it really lit a fire in Donnie that burns today about what are the human needs of the people around him and how does he get resources to those people so they can live better lives. That is extended through what we've seen at Francis Howell High School with these New Melody 411 Facebook posts, but also taking classes in biomedical science, being part of the CAPS program where he's pursuing a career in the health field. I think he wants to be an EMT. And he's even picked out his future workstation, which is the fire station in New Melody, which is right next to the field where he used to play football as a junior Viking. So for all these reasons and more, I'm very proud to present Donnie for recognition tonight, and I share in his family's pride for all this young man has become.
Thank you, Dr. Wedlock. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Ashley Mayer, who will present our best practice session about the Max Scholars Program at Francis Howell Central. Dr. Mayer?
Thank you. All right, so I brought some students with me. And so I cannot say enough great things about these kids. Well, wait just a minute so I don't get ahead of myself. Okay, so the Max Scholars is a nationwide program. Max stands for Multicultural Achievement Committee. So what that basically means is that this is a historically underrepresented group of kids who are striving for not only academic excellence as we prepare them for college and career, but also for character and involvement and attachment at Francis Howell Central. So the six, one of us didn't show up. The 7 of us and the 6 of them are some of the best kids I have ever come across. They are so, so dedicated, not only to this program, to their 4 years, to their transition, to their next phase of life, but also to Central as a whole. So I will introduce them, and then each one of them is going to talk just a little bit as well. Okay, so this is Samaya and Grace, Alexis, Michaela, Aiden, and Isaiah. Okay. Mr. Wilson, are you my slide advancer? Oh, thank you. Okay, so each Max Scholar completes a 4-year roadmap. This is a pretty new plan for us. We developed this last year.
But basically the gist is that everyone has a plan of check boxes, so to speak, of things that they will accomplish within each grade level. So ninth graders come in and they have a program that's tailored to just ninth grade. Last year we actually started in 8th grade, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is the plan that we present to them as soon as they enroll. The far side of that screen is a contract that the Max Scholars actually signed, saying that not only are they going to hold themselves to a higher esteem as a leader in the building, but they're going to achieve academic excellence by getting a 3.0 GPA. They'll have a good attendance rate. They will not have any school discipline. They'll be involved in other things. They sign it, and then we really celebrate that, and you'll see that in just a little bit as well.
Yeah, so every year, Max Scholars has the Summer Institute at FHC, where each grade level does something different. In ninth grade, they really start to learn about the basics of Max Scholars, and they build connections with people from different grade levels. 10th grade, we start working on ACT plans. We have Dr. Mark Arnold from SLU come in and help us. He's a huge help. He helps the 11th graders too, and we get practice ACT amplets. And then the 12th grade starts leadership college prep and really starts building resumes and working to the next level.
Max Scholars also has a partnership with UMSL. We have some volunteers who do slideshows for us to help us out with our college readiness and also potential careers as well. They also have separate programs outside of Max Scholars. So we have the Bridge program, which is also under UMSL too, and then the Summer Academy and the ACT prep. The Bridge program has helped me a lot. I've also done the ACT prep too. It helped me raise my ACT up 5 points. Yeah.
Mentors for College is something new that we did this year, and pretty much what it is that it's people in the St. Louis area that are already in different fields that kids like us would want to be in, and what happens is the kids and the mentor come together and they form a plan of how they're going to get to where the mentor is, and the mentor helps them to get to the path that they want to get down.
So this year we invited all the Max Scholars to a meeting and had a couple of us who have been in AP classes kind of explain our pathway and how it has benefited us to take AP classes, such as college credit, cheaper college credit for that, and extra GPA boosts, and just kind of getting younger Max Scholars excited about taking AP courses and what really helps them and what will help them get into their career path in college.
So this is a new thing we started doing, and like Aiden kind of hit on earlier. We started offering new free practice ACT with Dr. Arnold from SLU, and it's pretty much just to help kids who can't afford those books kind of get a better grasp on ways to prepare for the ACT and kind of have a better footing, so when they take it, they feel more prepared.
This is a quote from Barack Obama that says, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek."
Like I said, this is our leadership team. All 6 of the people behind me are sensational students. They are sensational citizens in our community, and I could not be prouder to work with these kids. So thank you.
Almost done, I promise. So this is actually a really cool thing we did last year. What we did is we recorded ourselves reading these children's books of kids that, look like minorities, and they were presented to kids in younger grades, which is really neat for a lot of us because we didn't have the opportunity of seeing people who looked like us in many of our schools. So it was a nice way to show like a connection with the upper grade levels.
Hi. Some quick facts for you guys. Our attendance rate is 98.5, and our average GPA of all the members in the group is 3.3. 49% of the Max Scholars are involved in any other activity outside of the group, which means you could be playing basketball, golf, volleyball, be a cheerleader, and you still have time.
And in the picture you see, this was a circle conversation. And during our seminar, which is about 20 minutes, each person or each one of us, we can talk and then present a slide. And so everyone in the group is in that picture. And it was very powerful and encouraging walking out there because most of our members are colorful. There's a lot of people from different minorities, African American students, Indian, everything, and seeing that was just really powerful, I'd say. But yeah, and as Michaela said, this group is really beneficial, and I just joined this year, and I'm very glad I did.
We really are almost done. Okay, so this is something that we did new last year, and we're going to do again this year. Last year we piloted with Sager, where we took a group of these leaders, Dr. Mark Arnold, who they talked about with the ACT. We took our college and career counselor and walked over to Sager and really talked to their 8th graders who might be interested in joining our Max Scholars so that we could recruit them in advance. So what we did is got all the data that you see up there ready to go in advance, and we invited them, so it was a big deal. We invited them to the auditorium and really talked up Max Scholars so that they could make a connection not only with Central and a plan for them for the next 4 years, but also with the student leaders who you see behind me. I know. Will you just introduce it?
This is what Math Scholars means to us. This is kind of a video we all put together of one word that we can describe Math Scholars.
Powerful. Opportunities. Togetherness. Community. Achievements. Gratefulness. Diversity. Inclusive. Community. Equality.
Preparedness.
Community. Family.
Responsible.
Equality.
Opportunity.
Inspirational.
Diverse. Community.
Unity.
Diverse.
Good connection. Equality. Supportive.
Amazing. Connection. Just different.
Helpful.
Helpful.
Adversity.
Beneficial.
Unique.
Empowering. Encouraging.
Diversity. Special. Educational.
Please come to the attendance office. Thank you.
A learning experience.
Encompassing.
Inspirational.
Powerful.
Community. Inspirational.
Inspiring.
Okay, so we're about 55 students within the Max Scholars. Just one more thing, if you were interested in getting to be a part of the Max Scholars or contributing in any way, we are always looking for people who are interested in doing the Mentors for College program. So if that is something of interest to you, you can certainly reach out to me or to Dr. Sonny Arnell, anybody at Central, and we can get you going on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now move on to Patron Comments. During Patron Comments, citizens are invited to address the Board of Education concerning issues related to the school district. Speakers are called forward in the order of sign-up, and each speaker has 3 minutes to make their remarks. Please remember that only one speaker is allowed at the podium at a time, and combining time or giving your time to someone else is not permitted. The board appreciates that you have taken the time to come this evening, and we value both your input and your perspective. I would like to remind everyone that we expect the speakers will remain civil and respectful when given remarks, and if anyone becomes disruptive, we reserve the right to cut those 3 minutes short. Verbally aggressive language and vulgarity in any form is not acceptable and will not be tolerated. Our first speaker, we welcome Vivian Ganttars.
I continue to receive complaints from parents about books in our middle and high schools. Recently, parents called me to say 6th grade students at a Girl Scout camp had brought the new Heartstopper series, and now 6 girls thought they might be gay. Heartstopper is another comic book style medium. I wouldn't even call it a book. It's pure trash. I have done 3 book challenges, and I would like to share a few observations. Number 1, parents, if you put your children in an AP language arts class to get college credit, you are going to get vulgarity, F-bombs, rape, incest, violence, and sexual perversion. So ask yourself, is your 15 or 16-year-old ready for material meant for 18 and up? These books could be restricted and should be restricted to those students in the AP language classes whose parents know to what their children will be exposed. It's unrealistic to expect all other parents to seek out all the objectionable books in the district and restrict them. It's unrealistic and unfair. Number 2, teachers, librarians, and Dr. Brothers were very courteous to me and allowed me ample opportunity to express my concerns. But the format of the book challenge is to list the pros and cons of each book and remedy while giving equal weight to each factor. I made the following points. A, making students feel better doesn't solve their problem. B, a book that violates Francis Howell's own policies on pornography, sex education, foul language, and bullying sets a mixed message to students. C, written descriptions of sexual acts with children under the age of 14 may put Francis Howell in danger of providing child pornography. And D, Policy 2742 on sexual abuse training requires prior parent approval, and Policy 2835 on medical treatment and educational services is violated when students can get hold of books like Crank and George. Yet, consequential objections are outnumbered by less impactful ones. Under this logic, a soup with a dash of arsenic would be eaten by the challenge committee if the chef was famous, the vegetables were colorful, and the sodium content was low. This is not critical thinking. Number 3, Francis Howell teachers care about their students. Teachers see drug and alcohol abuse, rape, depression, and even suicide among their student body. Teachers believe that by providing safe spaces for unhappy students, that they are helping them. One teacher intimated that they were even aware of a trauma suffered by a student that had never been shared with the parent. Teachers believe when students read books about others with similar troubles, students will somehow feel better.
Thank you.
Which
Your
teachers
time is
equip
up.
to being better.
Next up, we have Randy Cook.
Good evening. In agenda item 10F tonight, there's a recommendation to approve almost $4.2 million for renovations at the district's recently purchased 3-story office building. I must say I'm honestly impressed that the district has reduced some of the scope of this project to lower the cost below the original base bid amount of over $4.5 million. I even commented over the weekend that I didn't think it possible, so I am happy to have been proven wrong here. That said, does anyone know how much renovations of an office building should cost? We have a number of just under $4.2 million, but what does that really mean? What if it were $6.5 million? Would that mean anything different to you? The question I would ask is, relative to what? The answer, of course, is the estimate. What was the estimate for this $4.2 million of spending you're going to consider tonight? Do any of you know? Does the public know? Was the estimate $2 million, $4 million, $6 million? To be transparent, I urge the board again to insist that the estimates are included in these spending memos to the board. As it turns out, the estimate for this work was $4 million, so 4.2, especially in this climate, isn't all that bad. It's also good the Prop S Financials website is back up and running now, and shows that this office space project has over $4.2 million left in the budget, so we have enough. What isn't so great is that over the weekend, this same budget showed under $4 million left. So I compared the screenshot I took over the weekend with the current numbers on the Prop S website, And I see we have more money left now because the amount of committed funds went down and the amount of money already spent went down. I'm sure there's a perfectly legitimate explanation, but I think this is a prime example of why we need an independent audit of the Prop S financials at a minimum. Which brings me to my next point, item 10G in the agenda, the audit of Prop S. The board asked for an audit at for an audit, and the administration is recommending business as usual. I urge the board to reject item 10G, which I trust most, if not all of you, were already planning to do. Thank you.
Next up, we have Devin Thornton.
I'm here today to talk about removing the mask mandates indefinitely and to consider this in your COVID-19 update. On December 16th at the last Board of Education meeting, I was here to speak about the kids who are being ignored and left behind in the whole fiasco you have going on with the masks. The children with sensory issues, developmental delays, speech delays, emotional dysfunctions, the children who are depressed thinking there's no end in sight. You gave them a glimmer of hope, and they were able to enjoy school again until you ripped it out from underneath of them with reinstating this mandate. It's difficult for these kids to flip-flop and change on a whim, and the parents have been supplied with no support for their children as you change course due to percentage. Not to mention you did all of this based off of hearsay, making it clear to everyone here that the district gets their COVID numbers based off of pure hearsay. No proof required, just a phone call from a parent, and someone believes them, and it's documented. Do you know how difficult it is to actually obtain a physical COVID test at the moment? Did it ever dawn on you that some of these people think their children have COVID when it's actually the common cold or flu? Because it is cold and flu season. I also wanted to make clear to everyone that these COVID numbers are documented by multiple and random individuals throughout the school. Who knows if these numbers have been tampered with, misinterpreted, or written down incorrectly? Not to mention, again, it's just hearsay. So these mandates that you are implementing are not only illegal, but they are based off of no factual information. Has anyone heard of the placebo effect? Because we can compare that to what's taking place now. There is way too many studies to even spout about how they have done with mask versus no mask to show that there's no difference in the COVID transmission numbers between the two. Look what this is doing to our school, not only for the students, but for the staff who must stay quiet in fear of repercussions. Were their opinions taken into consideration? How much do you value your staff? Staffing and morale is very low at school currently. No wonder. Who wants to work for a district that doesn't value you or how you feel? There are many job openings everywhere that I'm sure may have better incentives than we can offer, especially considering that their voices and opinions are being discredited. As a parent, I was never asked my opinion, and I have an opinion on this matter, especially because it affects my child. Why is my opinion not important to Francis Howell? Not once did I receive a survey asking for my opinion about my child being forced to wear a mask. Instead of wasting all these resources on masks and how to wear them properly, let's talk about nutrition, taking care of their emotional well-being. Forcing children to wear masks while partaking in PE, music, and recess is cruel. Have you ever tried to exercise with a mask on? It's very difficult to breathe, so what you're doing is child abuse and nothing more. Let's put the matter back in the hands of the parents. Let them make choices for their own children. Make masks optional and just leave it alone.
Next up, we have Adam Bertrand.
Good evening. At last month's board meeting, we had an amazing teacher speak about stress and lack of support currently felt within the district. She wasn't just speaking for herself, but providing a voice for many other terrific teachers throughout the district, teachers looking for leadership and a path forward. Teachers are trying to build understanding around what is preventing them from doing their job of educating our children. It's nice that the district is giving some time off, but this is a short-term solution for a long-term problem. I don't think our great teachers find value in losing classroom days, as they truly want all kids to continue learning. The question becomes, how do we support them? How do we give them the time needed for proper planning or even having a full lunch break? Many parents want to help and be part of a solution, and I would propose the district implement a volunteer recess para program for willing parents. This isn't a silver bullet, but would be an immediate step in the right direction. I also asked the district to review the budget to determine if a portion of the $1 million earmarked for strategic planning would be better served in supporting our current teacher needs. A focus on the future is excellent, but not at the detriment of our current students. Beyond this, the board must begin the process of restoring community trust broken by recent events. Here too, there are basic common sense items that can be undertaken. First, I request the board seek out an independent party to investigate all information surrounding Prop S. The what, when, and why of our current situation is needed information to put proper policies and controls in place. We must do all we can to make sure this predicament doesn't happen again. Second, I request we immediately cease the use of thought exchange for decision making until proper controls can be put in place. These controls must guarantee those providing input into the district are proper district stakeholders. Third, I request that the bylaws governing all district committees be made public and require approval by the Board of Education. With these actions, the community can gain a better understanding of district operations and decisions as we begin the process of restoring the trust. Thank you.
Next up, we have Ken Gontars.
I'd now like to direct our attention to the subject of ideologies. Many conflicts have been fought over beliefs and principles, and many, many American sons and daughters have paid the ultimate price with such causes. Today, we are seeing the emergence of a great dialectic dividing this country: capitalism versus Marxism, socialism, communism. Surely we are all aware of the Marxist ideologies slowly introduced into our public schools via the teaching of critical race theory. I've attended many meet and greets of the candidate events. I've gone to many town hall meetings, have appeared at many local civic organizations, and have seen and met thousands of parents who are voicing concern and outrage. In James Lindsay's book, Race Marxism, The Truth About Critical Race Theory and Praxis, he exhaustively writes of the rise of the Nazis in 1933 and how the Frankfurt School of Neo-Marxism has worked tirelessly to undercut capitalism. He carefully shows the parallels of what happened then and what's happening now in this country. We'd be foolish to think that it can't happen here. If there is one thing that history has taught us, it's that history has taught us very little. As already noted, a major way that Marxist ideology is being advanced in our society today is through the introduction of critical race theory. Such prominent notables as Ibram Kendi, Cheryl Harris, Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's the founder of the 1619 Project, and even LeGarrette King are spearheading efforts to gain acceptance of this ideology by the influence, the advocacy, and their ability to teach curriculums introduced into our schools now. Suffice it to say, now in the Francis Howell Black History curriculum, we find LeGarrette King, the self-proclaimed expert of critical race theory, advancing and supporting the 1619 Project. There is not one more CRT-centric perspective of Black history than the 1619 Project perspective. 100 million people have died, have been imprisoned, or have been starved to death in just this century alone at the hands of Marxist, socialist, and communist regimes. Look at the oppression and the tyranny of these regimes in North Korea, in China, in Russia, Cuba, and Venezuela. Is this what we want in America? Our country is at an existential tipping point. Let's be judicious in the ideologies we teach. I leave you with this piercing statement from Plato, who wrote, "Beware of what you teach the children, and beware who teaches them." Thank you.
Next up, we have Jarrett Pillsbury.
Good evening, Board. Jarrett Pillsbury, parent of 2 in the district. It's good to see you all again. Last spoke in August. Thanks very much for the time tonight. So first, a quick thank you. Thank you for making the tough call to go mask mandatory for pre-K through 12th in the face of the data. My children are presently thriving in in-person learning, and I'm grateful. I appreciate, as I feel the silent majority does, that the masks were made mandatory these past 2 weeks. Board, I know you face political pressures to make masks optional and to avoid conversations around vaccinations, which would force your hand. My sister-in-law texted today. Her school is going virtual for at least a week due to COVID cases. We know some universities are starting the new term as virtual. My wife and I have friends with children in private schools in the area who've been mask mandatory since August. Debate about masking is simply not an issue in those institutions. The governor's office has data showing that masks work to reduce spread of COVID. Steering toward the political realm for a moment, former President Trump is vaccinated. Current President Biden is vaccinated. State Senator Bob Onder, who once tried to speak before this very chamber, is vaccinated. Pick your team. I'm not pro-mask. I'm anti-virus. And now is not the time to relax mitigations. You see the numbers much more closely than I do. Given the current number of students, staff infected, challenges with attendance rates and finding substitutes, the ability of this variant for breakthrough and recurring infections, the high community rate, and our hospitals' lack of capacity, continuing mask mandates should continue. It is possible that this masking is the key to keeping our schools in person and safe. I'd urge you to keep these mitigations in place through the present surge, and thank you again for making decisions to keep this community and the greater community safe. Thank you all.
Next up, we have Dan Myers. No Dan? Okay. Next up, we have Chris Brooks.
Good evening, Board. I'm going to dispense with my usual speed reading of a speech here. I'm appreciative of the district finally putting the Prop S financials some 8 months after it was requested to do so. You managed to get it up in a week after the bid was passed. That's great. I want to read you some of the Prop S financials because, as we talked about before, the new high school went from consuming 1/3 of the budget to now consuming 2/3 of the bond budget. And so I thought I would share some of the impacts, at least in the current budget documents, maybe these have changed, but this is what's up there, to the other schools, as in these are the schools who are not getting their needed repairs. Okay, on the current budget, we have $30 million remaining. There's about $100 million worth of work that needs to be done. So, who are the winners? Barnwell Middle, no HVAC replacement, fields, parking lot, roof updates. Becky David, no HVAC replacement, parking lots, playgrounds, field updates. Bryan Middle, no interior and exterior renovations, HVAC, parking lots, field update replacement. Burbs building is not getting a roof replacement. Causey Elementary is missing HVAC, interior, exterior, parking lots, playgrounds, field updated. Central Elementary is going to miss out, so will Daniel Boone Elementary. So will the district-wide ADA updates that were going to be made. Currently, there's nothing in the budget for district-wide signage. The Early Childhood Central, Early Childhood Hackman, Early Childhood Meadows Parkway, Early Childhood Playgrounds. Fairmount and Henderson may still get something out of it. That's currently to be determined. Francis Howell Central High, your auditorium, HVAC, interior, exterior, softball field are next. Francis Howell High, your auditorium addition, roof replacement, parking lots, tennis courts, bleachers, wrestling room updates. Nope. Francis Howell Middle, HVAC, parking lots, field updates, replacements, gone. Harvest Ridge Elementary, HVAC, interior, exterior. Okay, we get the point here, ladies and gentlemen. Because no controls were in place during the bid process, during the estimating process, as costs increased, and as the project manager reported no numbers for 6 months, now we have to make some hard decisions, right? Or ask the community for another $100 million bond increase. This is why we're calling for an audit. We are not asking the project manager to come forward and tell us how he's saving $1,000 here, $1,000 there going forward. We want someone independent, not involved with the existing project, that's going to come in and say, here's what we did wrong, and here's how we're going to do it better next time. And if this board is unable to approve that, and if the administration is unwilling to do it, then I fully intend to organize a petition audit to have the state auditor step in and find out what the heck is going on with the financials in our district. Thank you.
Next up, we have Grant Garcia. Jamie Martin.
Hello. As a former language arts teacher, I often taught persuasive writing in January. Also the month of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, one of the greatest persuasive speakers and writers of his time, arguably of all time. One of my favorite pieces is his I Have a Dream speech, with a line that has often been quoted lately by those who oppose critical race theory. The line states, "I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." It's a beautiful line. But I want to challenge some who quote it. I brought a former student with me today. Samantha, will you please stand? This is Samantha's annotated copy of Dr. King's speech, with outstanding notes about the rich meaning of the metaphors and similes and impact of repetition, all great persuasive devices. Thanks, Sam. A study of this speech makes it difficult to suggest Dr. King would reject suggestions that our systems are tainted by racism, or that white citizens often enjoy more privilege than black ones. In fact, Dr. King taught systemic racism in the opening of this same speech. He said, "When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir, a promise that all men would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of a happiness. It is obvious that America has defaulted on this promissory note," he said, "insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. America has given a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But," he said, "we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation." Dr. King went on to describe the fierce urgency of now, saying it would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. Some who oppose CRT say things have improved, that slow, steady progress is enough. But Dr. King calls this thinking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. The next time that you hear Dr. King quoted, I invite you to think about the demands of his speech that have not yet been met, about vaults of opportunity, lack of economic mobility, and voter restrictions. He had a hope for a transformation. I invite everyone here to be part of that transformation by examining bias in our individual hearts and in our public schools. Thank you.
Next up, we have FHEA.
Well, I'll hold this. Good evening, Board of Education, Cabinet, and Chiefs. My name's Anita Keener, and I am the president of the Francis Howell Education Association. Often, after the first semester or major landmark, we reflect on how things went. We would like to ask each of you to do a 6-month reflection of the 2021-2022 school year, if you haven't already done so. Since we have recently hit our first semester mark, ask yourself, have we done all that we can to move this district forward in a positive, productive manner? Have we communicated to our constituents, parents, and staff our plans to do so? Have we included and invited our constituents, parents, and staff in developing those plans? Have we listened to our constituents, parents, and staff? Have we developed partnerships that will lead to a better future for our district? If the answer is yes to these questions, then let's continue moving forward. If the answer is no to any of those questions, then maybe it's time to adjust our priorities, to take a step back and look at what we have done and what we are doing and what needs to be done. We do this every day as educators. We ask ourselves, did the lesson work? Did the students learn what they needed to? Or do I need to move forward or reteach? To do anything less than that would be hurting our students, staff, parents, and community. You all will make decisions tonight based on what has happened in southern Missouri with schools closing due to the lack of mitigation strategies. It is clear that our decision to wear masks was a good one. We have so many unfilled staff positions that it is difficult for our staff. People are losing their plan time. Some teachers lost 16 plan times last semester, and it is going to be worse this semester. There is a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. What does that mean to each of you as a community leader? Thank you.
Next up, we have FISPA. Okay, then we will move forward with our MSBA report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report for the month of January. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the food supply chain crisis that continues to plague school food service programs in Missouri and throughout the nation. Due largely to staffing shortages, a number of food distributors have reduced or eliminated service to school districts this year, significantly impacting the availability of food items. The situation is resulting in smaller menus and fewer food options for students. Jenna Knuth is the Director of Food and Nutrition Services for the North Kansas City School District and a board member of the Missouri School Nutrition Association. She says the food shortages that began last year are continuing this year.
A lot of those manufacturers just stopped producing their K-12 line. Some ramped back up this year. Some are saying they can't because of labor. So there are a lot of shorts that are going into the distributor, and they can't even get what they need to serve us on top of their labor issues, on top of our labor issues.
Knuth says in addition to supply chain problems, the cost of food that is available to school districts has risen by 15% or more. A recent survey by the National School Nutrition Association found 75% of school meal programs cite higher costs as a significant challenge. The survey says only about half of school meal programs nationwide found increases in the reimbursement rate from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to be sufficient to cover those increased costs. Knuth says the food shortage issue is a complicated one that is not likely to improve much in the near future.
When we can't get something from one of the distributors, we try to get it from another distributor, or we try to get it direct shipped from the manufacturer. So that means that the previous sales that they have to us fluctuate substantially. And so the manufacturer doesn't know who to send our products to, right? But we have to try to get that food anyway. So it's a little bit of a mess, and we're definitely looking forward to when things calm down.
Knuth says, fortunately, the federal government has given schools some flexibility for school meal patterns that dictate what meals must contain and how they must be delivered. She adds the food supply challenges are coming at a time when school food service programs are facing staffing problems of their own. The recent school shooting in Michigan that left 4 students dead has once again brought focus to the issue of providing our students and staff with a safe learning environment. The founder of a group called Safe and Sound Schools, Michelle Gay, addressed the issue of school safety at the recent Safe Schools and Colleges Forum, sponsored by MSBA's Center for Education Safety. She lost her daughter on December 14, 2012, in the Sandy Hook school tragedy. Gay told the audience it's essential that schools adopt a comprehensive approach to school safety.
one that includes mental and behavioral health resources and programs, our school counselors, our school psychs, our SEL programs, health and wellness, very much at the forefront right now, right? Our school nursing programs, school-based health clinics, making sure that kids are coming to school with full bellies and that we are reducing stress as much as we possibly can. The physical safety and security, obviously based on my story, you know what a priority that is for us. Culture, climate, and community that includes everybody, that brings everybody in and ensures that whoever you are, whatever your experiences are, you at least feel safe here in this building. You're all welcome here. Leadership, law, and policy, the guiding principles of any school safety program. And of course, the last cornerstone, operations and emergency management, where a lot of that day-to-day drilling, training, all of those procedures and plans fall.
The Safe and Sound Schools organization advocates for and provides research-based education, tool, and resources to ensure the safest possible learning environment for children and educators. The 2022 regular session of the Missouri Legislature convenes this month, and education bills are likely to be a major part of the legislative agenda this year. MSBA's priority for the 2022 session of the General Assembly include legislation to ensure a safe education environment for all children, funding to ensure adequate resources for all districts to meet state and federal standards, opposition to legislation moving school board elections from April to November and requiring school board candidates to run as a member of a political party, and legislation supporting the expansion of and access to high-capacity broadband internet services throughout Missouri. MSBA will keep you informed about legislative developments during the session through our weekly Legislative Voice newsletter, our daily updates on Twitter, through critical issue alerts, and through periodic webinars. And don't forget to register for MSBA's Legislative Forum set for March 7th in Jefferson City. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Next up, we will receive an update on Proposition S by Mr. Jeremy Beller.
Good evening, Board. I'll wait for the PowerPoint to come up. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little update today on Francis Howell North, and then also I have a little video to show you, and we'll stop the video at some different times and try to give some unique perspectives of where we are in the project, and it was captured with the drone, so we'll get to that in a second. But some of the highlights of what's going on the site over the last month is no safety issues to report. We did have an audit done by the insurance carrier for the school district. We basically had an A+ on site. They actually even sent a letter to SM Wilson thanking them for doing such a good job keeping it safe for the construction workers and for the insurance carrier. So that was a very positive thing over the last month. Excavation continues for the foundations and the stem walls. Installation of rebar, grade beams, buttresses are going in as we speak. Also, we're still continuing in our MEFP underground work, so that's electrical conduits that are going in under the concrete slabs, plumbing work that's going in under the concrete slabs, and then all of our waste piping. So that's kind of ongoing stuff at a very high level. Here is the video, I believe. So I'll just talk as we go through this a little bit. There's no sound. So this is the original shot here in May of what the actual site looked like. This is starting now to happen over the summer. You can see as the work's going on. Rock starting to be installed on the site. Yeah, she's going to pause it here in a second, right here. I think we can still see it if you pause it. That's okay. You can keep going, Jane. I can talk as we go. But you start to see some of the walls being built right in here. These are the new gym areas. some of the large foundation walls that are being put in. This is a temporary detention basin that will not be there permanently, but is being put in on a temporary basis during construction. Now we're actually looking the other way down the site. So these are the two lower levels of what we call the U. Here's the major foundation wall with the buttresses being constructed. We build it this way so we can backfill the wall without the steel being set. Some of the auditorium areas, some of the gym areas as we go up. Just keep going, Jane, it's okay. It's not pausing, we can see it. Again, looking the other way, now looking to schools down here, looking this way. This is actually where the stadium will be sitting down in this area. These are some of the gymnasium. The new gymnasium is here. New entrance to the school is here. New parking lot will be actually in this area. So, and then that was shot actually on December. So even in the past month, there's actually been more work done on that. But I think that gives the board kind of a different perspective that maybe they're not seeing. There is a lot of work going on down on that site. You can't actually see it even if you drive by. But hopefully that helps. We'll try to continue to bring drone videos like that and show them during board meetings to maybe help everyone understand actually what's going on. So hopefully that's a beneficial tool for you guys. Can you make it go forward, Jane? I can't. There's just some pictures here. Yeah. So here's some pictures. Since that drone video is actually being shown, we actually now are pouring slabs. So slab on grades that were poured about 2 weeks ago. You can start seeing these. These are the lower level slabs on the right. That's them actually pouring them on the left with the whirlybirds on top of them, actually hardening the concrete. This is the actual retaining wall that sits on the down on the new site where the tennis courts are. We had someone stand out there just to give a perspective of just how big this retaining wall actually is. So this is one of the first things that was actually done over the summer. And then you can see we've got our seating going and our fence up. That fence was put up to ensure safety on the site, just in case a kid were to wander on or something like that. There's protection for them. Here you can see the foundation wall being built, just how large this foundation wall is and all the buttresses that are going on as part of it. You can see the guy over on the left standing next to it. So that's kind of the update on Francis Howell North. It's exciting. Things are going on, and hopefully when the weather gets a little warmer, we can start giving some tours to any of you guys that want to come out and see it. So. Moving on to 801 Corporate, Union DLC, so we'll have more information later on this, but the RFPs were sent out. 4 bids were received on the project. We have met with the low bidder. There's a recommendation tonight to move forward with the work, and the work, assuming it were to be approved by the board this evening, will start as soon as possible, hopefully sometime in mid-February. So that is a quick overview of Francis Howell North and 801. I would be happy to answer any questions you guys have at this time.
Thanks for the presentation. Just as a reminder, I know you've answered this question before, but I just want to throw it out there. What's your function for the district? What's your function for the district? You work for Atlas. Are you an employee of SM Wilson?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, Mr. Jiggemeier. I work for a company called Atlas Building Group. We're a mid-range size contractor in the St. Louis area and nationally as well. I do not work for SM Wilson. I do not work for Francis Howell School District. I work for Atlas Building Group. My role is primarily to be what we would call an owner's representative. I represent you guys' interests as an independent party to oversee really anything related to Prop S. My job is to be your eyes and ears on the job sites, not only from the design piece, budgetary pieces, but then also once construction actually starts. So that's how I'm employed, and that is the service that I give to Francis Howell School District.
So your job and function would be the same whether it was Perrick or some other construction company. In fact, I believe it's a different firm that we're using for 801 as well, right?
That's correct. It's a different design firm for 801, Fox Architects. Yes, my role doesn't change depending on who the general contractors work. I was in the same role during the last prop that was passed, and we built Francis Howell High School. I've had the great pleasure of working with multiple general contractors, Brinkman, Lawler, SM Wilson, Hoff Construction, Demeen, Lamb, they've all been involved on projects throughout the past 15 years for Francis Howell. So it doesn't matter who's there. And of course, my company doesn't bid on any of that work because I'm involved in representing you guys as an independent company. So, yeah.
Any other questions, board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Board, I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda items for January 20th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve R2850 second reading as presented.
Second.
Any discussion on this, board?
Yes, I'd like to know why it was pulled.
I asked for this to be pulled from the agenda. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood. This is regarding inoculation of students. This was put into place where we were having some issues with the whooping cough back in the days. Right now, we're asking our parents to provide a religious exemption every year for their kids if they don't want them inoculated, and that's fine. What their district is asking us to do is to take that away and just have to sign a religious exemption once. Personally, I think that I am a firm believer in vaccinations. I'm a school nurse. I respect the science, so I will be voting no on this issue.
Any other questions or comments, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion or questions, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the financial statements for December 2021 as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. The one thing that I would point out is that, as I noted in the memo, the state funding formula is currently using the 6375, which is essentially full funding of the formula. Achieving that in December is great for us to know that we're going to be able to meet our budget. Last year, of course, because of pandemic-related concerns at the state level, the state reduced what the SAT was in the calculation, and it really wasn't until we got to May and June that we approached full funding. So it's great that here in December we are able to show that the formula is essentially fully funded. Anyone who followed the governor's State of the State address yesterday will note that the state of Missouri has an unusual problem of having a huge budget surplus. So it's not surprising that the formula is being fully funded and that it's recommended for full funding next year. But we are appreciative of having that certainty earlier in the fiscal year than we have had in the past.
Any questions, board? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the preschool and vacation station tuition rates for fiscal year 23 as shown in Exhibits 3 and 4 for each program.
So moved.
Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. We have had a change in the way that we manage our vacation station and preschool programs. So a separate administrator is in charge of each of those programs. It used to be under a single administrator. And so that's why they're presented as two separate programs in the handouts. The increases in tuition are I think relatively modest given the rate of inflation that we're experiencing currently, as we continue to provide a very high-quality program both in the preschool setting and for a before and after school care or a vacation station program. So very proud of the work that we're doing in both areas and glad to bring this recommendation tonight.
Any questions or comments, board?
The elimination of the ECSE and EC lunch bunch program. Children that qualified for early childhood special education programming, parents were able to put their children in all day. They had a lunch bunch, and then they attended a typical class in the afternoon. I am worried about access for our parents with the SE needs, and so therefore I'm not in favor of this.
Anything else, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the plans for adapting the fields at Francis House Central High School to better accommodate the baseball and softball programs. So moved. Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. The proposal here is to do some temporary modifications on an ongoing basis to allow a greater utilization of the two fields that are available at Francis Howell Central to support both the baseball and the softball program. We had extensive conversations with parents who were concerned on this topic that we involved, of course, our facilities director, the principal and activities director from Francis Howell Central, as well as baseball and softball coaches, in arriving at a solution that we believe is a very workable alternative until we're able to determine a permanent outcome for how we might address the baseball and softball programs at Francis Howell Central. And I would like to say that it's possible that what's being proposed tonight would be something that we would do for an indefinite period of time. But at least for right now, it helps us to meet some of the deficiencies in providing access that is equitable between the baseball and softball programs and do that for a relatively small amount of money spent on an annual basis.
Sorry. And I will add, through this process, we've been working on this for a while, and it also during this process ended up that we had a complaint filed with the Office of Civil Rights about the access to facilities within those fields. And so we also believe that this will resolve that. Upon approval by the board, we would submit this to OCR to review that. We believe that this will finalize that complaint and get us back in compliance.
Any questions, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve engaging Business Information Services, LLC, to perform a demographic study for the district at a cost of $56,815.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. The district has for a number of years worked internally to develop enrollment projections for our buildings. One of the things I did when I arrived at Francis Howell was brought in the methodology of the cohort survival method for helping us. And that was very useful because the district was at that time really beginning to experience a much more stable enrollment. The period of growth in the 90s and early 2000s had leveled off. And so using the cohort survival was an added tool that really helped us bring some greater clarity to our enrollment projections. But things do change over time, and we've not done a formal demographic study in the 17 years that I've been here. And we think it's appropriate now that as we see growth in some of our surrounding communities, certainly the the city of Cottleville is substantially different today than it was even 5 years ago. And the plans that they have for growth within the city of Cottleville, with the city of O'Fall and the city of St. Peters, what those communities are expecting to happen are important considerations in determining how many students we might receive as a result of changes that are happening at the city level. We as a school district don't have the resources and contacts to really delve into the details that are involved in some of the citywide decision-making processes about their development plans. And we think it's appropriate at this juncture to use the services of a professional demographer. The recommended vendor, Business Information Services, has a great track record working with school districts across the state of Missouri. They have substantial contacts with cities and are able to get to some of the information that will be useful. As we take a look at what's going to happen with our facilities over time, this will give us a little bit greater clarity that it really isn't possible using the methodologies that we've had previously, which is live birth rate and then the cohort survival. So we're happy to bring a recommendation to employ this company to help us gain a little bit greater clarity about what the trends will be for our schools going forward.
Any questions, board?
When do you see that this would be the procedure be started, and when do you plan on bringing this back to the board with what's going on?
Assuming approval tonight, Mrs. Stiglich, I would be in contact with the vendor and begin that process. They have a preliminary timeline outlined within their RFP, but I would want to really solidify that with them, given that we'll be starting now here for all intents and purposes at the beginning of February. I can't speak to what other commitments the vendor might have at this time that could impact the schedule, but I'll be happy to have, I think Dr. Hoven can provide you an update through the Friday update to help you understand what the schedule would be. The intent would certainly be to begin immediately and to conclude this in a fairly short period of time so that we could have information that will help guide us for decisions for the next school year. But again, that's dependent upon what the demographer may have on his schedule right now and how our work might interface with other projects that he's involved with.
Anything else, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve Hoff Construction to perform renovations on 801 Corporate Center Drive for $4,187,000 as presented.
Second.
Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. I'll begin the conversation, but I'd like to invite Mr. Bettler to the podium as well. He conducted the interviews along with Mr. John Klein with the vendors and would be able to answer questions. We are happy to move forward with this project. Of course, the driving factor here really is to secure a much more suitable location for our Union High School program. They're currently located in Building C at the Francis Howell High School campus. We've, working through the architect with our comprehensive facilities master plan, it was determined that the cost of renovating the Building C at the campus was not a cost-effective way to approach housing that program. The amount of renovation and so forth to that building would far exceed the value. So we were able to purchase the 801 Corporate Center Drive building, and these renovations are part of an ongoing plan to house the Union High School program. We also have the added advantage of being able to bring together most all, if not all, of the academic team members who have been scattered at various locations throughout the district. Some of those, the District Learning Center, of course, is also located at the C building at Francis Howell High. And so this is part of our overall bond issue plan and an approach to accommodating our Union High School program and some of the other programs that would be displaced as we transition away from Building C. So, Mr. Bettler, if you'd like to give just a background on the interview process and your discussions with the contractors.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Supple. So a little bit of background on the design. The architect started designing this building roughly 5 to 6 months ago. They came back with a preliminary design, 50% set of documents. We did do some preliminary budget work as part of that. The architectural firm did. Realized very quickly that what we were not going to be able to afford everything that was on those drawings. So we did pivot a bit and made some revisions to the documents. The architects were able to do that in a timely fashion. Those drawings were issued somewhere in the early part of December for bid with the new changes, which was great. They went out for bid, and then bids were opened a couple of weeks ago. So we did receive 4 bids on the project, which we were encouraged by. All those bids were very close together, which was another very encouraging thing and a compliment to Fox Architects for such a tight bid scope, bid variance. Hoff was the apparent low bidder at 4.551030. That is the company that we're recommending to use. After they bid the job, part of the interviews, one of the conversations did become that we would most likely not be able to get our HVAC units in time based on long lead concerns still in the industry. So part of that discussion then morphed into looking at those units again and really taking a hard look if it's something we absolutely have to do at this time to that building. And in meeting with our engineers, meeting with our design team, working with our facilities department, it did become apparent that the units that are there will function for the time being, and we could go ahead and make the decision not to remove and replace those as part of this project. So we reached out to Hoff, had a conversation, got a price on that. You see that in the memorandum of what the reflection is of that deduct, roughly in the neighborhood of $350,000 we were able to take out of the scope. So with that reflection then, that's why the total bottom line price as the recommendation for Hoff Construction is for $4,187,000. So just a little background on how that process worked. Again, I would thank not only our architects, but all of the contractors that did submit bids on this project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, board?
All right, here I go. Did we bid the architectural work on that building?
We consider architects to be a professional service, and our policy does not require architectural services to be bid. So we understood 2 things. The work on Francis Howell North High School and some of the other identified projects for Proposition S were going to require a great deal of time of Hohner Associates, who is our primary architect. Hoff has a great deal of experience in renovating sites like the 801 Corporate Center building, and so we selected Fox Architects for their particular expertise in that area. But no, the services were not competitively bid because as a professional service, we're able to select the vendor that we feel delivers the most value for the school district.
Okay, so then my next question on that is, we've got a disclaimer here that says design costs along with soft costs are included in package BM1A, not included. So how much over budget are we going to be when we get those numbers?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Walker, I didn't, between the microphones and the mask, I had a hard time understanding your question.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. So down on the bottom, it says current remaining funds, design costs along with soft costs are included in package BM1A and are not included in project 19B budget amount. So what are the design costs, what are our soft costs, and how much over budget are we going to be?
Our design costs, Jeremy may have a specific number. Our design costs are around $250,000, $300,000 for this building.
And then what are our other soft costs going to equal up to?
Those would be some furniture, fixtures, and equipment purchases that might be necessary. we have purchasing that building was advantageous in that many of the furnishings for the conference rooms and so forth were included in the purchase price. And so we have conference tables and chairs. We have a tremendous amount of office chairs and so forth. But as you move into a new building, you may find that there are some things that just need to be purchased. For example, there is a refrigerator in one of the small break rooms downstairs that's a number of years old, and we have a lot of people who are going to be using that area. We may need to buy a larger refrigerator. So some of the soft costs would be those types of FF&E that would be needed to make the building serviceable once we move in.
So would it be safe to say we're probably going to be another $500,000 over this?
If you include the design fees right now, as Mr. Supple said, I would say $250,000. We don't have every final bill. Soft cost does include FF&E. I think the hope is to reuse as much of the furniture that's there. So my expectation would be that we would keep that to a minimal amount. Soft costs can also include things like testing, concrete cylinders, stuff like that. We won't have that kind of work on this project because it's not new construction. So I think that would be on the high side, Mrs. Walker. I would hope, 300 to 400 would be a reasonable expectation on that. But I'd be happy to get back to you with a budget for that if you'd like. It's no problem at all.
So where will that $300,000 to $400,000 come from?
Important to point out, there is a separate budget in Prop S for design fees. So the design fees associated with this are already budgeted for within the amount set aside for architectural and design fees. So that's not an additional cost, it's just not a brick and mortar cost. The number that you're looking at tonight is the brick and mortar cost. We do have a budget for the design fees.
And that is correct. That is what Kevin said is correct. That note really is a representative to help the board understand that soft costs and design costs are a separate line item within the Prop S budget that are not, it's just when we give you a budget, in a goal to be transparent as we can, when we give you a budget that is the brick and mortar cost, typically it's the direct cost of the contractor. So there are additional costs, obviously, for design and things like that. Those are at another line item within the Prop S budget. That's the purpose of that note. I apologize if it caused any confusion.
Okay. And then my final question is, where are the rest of the bids? Don't we typically have a breakdown that shows us we've got these 4 companies and this is what the bids are coming in at? I'm just curious because it also says the completed bid tabulation is attached for your reference, but there's nothing attached.
Mrs. Walker, I will apologize for that. I did provide that information. I was out of the office yesterday afternoon when this item was finalized, and I am sorry that it was not posted. We will amend that item by posting the bid tabulation. That information is available. Of course, the bids were all open publicly and read, so that information is out there, but the bid tabulation document should have been an exhibit to this recommendation letter.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve Atlas Building Group to provide monthly updates to the board on cost savings on the Francis Hall North and other Proposition S projects.
So moved.
Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. This is a follow-up to a request that the board made at its last meeting. Dr. Hoven and I have had some conversations with individual board members to help us better understand what the direction would be. And I understood it that there is a desire to provide regular updates, not only for the board, but for the community, to help show how we are continuing to find ways to reduce the overall costs of the projects that we're completing under Proposition S. We know that we're in a very challenging environment right now. We hope that there will be some stabilization in the short term, but we continue to hear some alarming news about the ongoing increases in costs of goods and services. Inflation seems to be here for a longer haul than any of us anticipated. So it's incumbent on us to find ways to be as efficient as possible with the dollars provided to us. And our proposal is to take advantage of the expertise of Atlas Building Group and Mr. Bettler to really serve a much stronger role, perhaps, as the owner representative, and to provide those updates to the board on efforts that we have undertaken and things that we have accomplished to effectuate additional cost savings within the Proposition S projects.
Thanks for bringing the recommendation forward and speaking with you like we talked about. I think it's important. I think some patrons' comments throughout the community were internal controls, and I think that having Atlas Group come in, talk about this, and look for avenues of cost savings, especially with the guaranteed maximum price being the guaranteed maximum price, there's ways that we can reduce that price overall in the long term, that's going to help provide those public internal controls. So that was kind of the way that I was looking at it when speaking with you. When I gave the recommendation that we need to do something, maybe audit wasn't the best word to use looking forward, because this was more of a future-focused issue. So when we looked at all the information, and I'm speaking specifically of me, how we got to the guaranteed maximum price made sense after we got that information. It wasn't at the fault of SM Wilson. It wasn't at the fault of Atlas that we didn't get the information the way that we should have. It's at the fault of two of the top administrators in the district. So I don't fault Atlas. I think that they are hired to be an advocate for our district and to talk to us about ways that we can save money. And so I think this is a cost-effective way to actually have those internal controls to also effectively manage our spending for Prop S going forward as well. That was my intent anyways.
So my intent was a little different. I was hoping that we would be looking at the entire project and how this is being run, including Atlas's performance. I'm concerned with the cost of Francis Howell North, and then we have the 801 building, and it's barely gone up. So that leaves me with a lot more questions. I think we were fairly specific at the last board meeting in even asking for an outside look at this. So when I saw this, to be honest, I'm very disappointed, because we don't need the people that are making these decisions to audit themselves. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I would think that we could find other local contractors that may be able to take a look at the bidding process, how all the things were done. What did that process look like to get us to $165 million without any updates along the way as to this was going to go that direction? And so, when Mr. Bettler was here speaking earlier, he talked about the budgeting being his responsibility. Well, I'd say that probably didn't work out as we had hoped. So that's why I am requesting that we have an outside person, whether it's a contractor, whether it's a competitor. I don't know, because this is not what I do, but I think that we owe it to our community. If we're going to do any type of looking at this, what this is asking for is already what we're paying him to do. So I just don't see what the benefit is of adding this, because he's already being paid to do this work.
Okay, I guess my understanding of what was brought at the last meeting is somewhat a little bit different than Ms. Walker and Mr. Ziegemeyer's. I understand that there was issues with the way that we went from an $83 million project, which was a 350,000 square foot project, to a $410,000 square foot project with other programs and stuff in there, and then which was admitted that that was a $110 million project prior to, and then it went to 156. That is an issue that has been identified, that has been corrected going forward, and it won't happen again. I don't understand why there wasn't any, I guess if you're saying the illusion of, number one is, I don't believe this is an audit. What we're getting here, I think that it's misnamed or mislabeled. What I think this is I think the problem that came along is that I think some frustration of some board members was the fact that had we known when we were going out to bid months before, we were actually looking at a $110 million project instead of an $83 million project, would that have changed anything? Would that have changed the design? Would that have changed anything? I would argue that that wouldn't have changed any of those aspects, but that's, you know, a difference of opinion there. But that, I think, is where it is. And I think what was being brought forward by the board and what I was hoping for is that we would get a monthly update from whether it be Atlas or SM Wilson or the other Hoff Construction, whoever we're having doing these things, showing us what the project was, where we're at, and how we're moving along. And that way we don't have those surprises that we had in the past. That was my intent on this thing. And I know tonight, I said we were going to discuss it tonight. It didn't say we were going to have a finalized project or a final, we said we wanted to have discussion on that tonight. That was my understanding of what we were bringing forward. I'm very comfortable with having them give us updates, having Atlas give us updates on this, and being the communication liaison between SM Wilson, different design changes or scope changes that we're bringing forward. I think that's a great solution. I do not believe that we need a forensic audit. I'll differ with Ms. Walker's opinion on that.
I'm not suggesting a forensic audit or anything of the sort. What I'm asking for is a professional to look at the processes. I'm not thinking an accountant to look at our numbers. I'm thinking a professional in the construction industry to look at how did SM Wilson put out the bids? Was all the information given out? How does that all look? What has Atlas been doing? Because when we go from the dollar amount that we were at to the dollar amount we're at now, something didn't happen in the middle. And so I think what Mike's saying is, well, the size of the building changed. That should have been a decision made by this board. That should not have just happened. And so I guess for me, I feel like, well, yeah, a monthly update, we should have been having that all along. So what I am asking for is I am asking that we have somebody from the outside take a look at the contractors that we have hired, SM Wilson and Atlas both, to look at the process and ensure that everything was done the way it was supposed to be done. So that's not a financial audit, it's not a forensic audit, it is truly somebody within the construction industry taking a look at how did we, and you know, is it right, and everything was followed the way it was supposed to get us from 80-something million to 160-something million. That's what I'm asking for.
Anything else, board? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve reinstating a temporary mask requirement for any building when the number of positive cases exceeds 3% of the building population of students and staff for 3 consecutive school days.
So moved. Second.
Dr. Rompus?
Good evening, board members. As you know, at the December Board of Education meeting, the recommendation was made and approved to return to mask optional for all staff and students when we return following the winter break. On January 7th, we did have an emergency board meeting that was held based on the significant increase in the number of cases both in St. Charles County and that we were experiencing within the Francis Howell School District. At that emergency meeting, a mask requirement was approved through tomorrow, January 21st, and at that meeting we shared that we would provide an update tonight on where we're at with our COVID data. As always, I want to start by sharing both our local county data as well as the data specifically within the Francis Howell School District. This first slide shows the 7-day rolling average of the number of new cases that are being reported. Previously, this slide had showed a 14-day rolling average, and at some point in the past month, the county changed that to a 7-day rolling average. You'll see that it reached a peak earlier this month, and although it does remain high, it appears that we peaked right around that second week of the month at just over 1,000 new cases being reported per day. It's currently back down to right around 900. And then if you look at the last several days, based on that 7-day rolling average, that will slowly come down over the next week or two. This slide shows the positive test rate as a percentage of tested individuals within our specific zip codes within the county. At around 37% currently, that's the highest that it's been, and it is about 10% higher than the previous high, which was in November of 2020. This slide is the number of confirmed cases per 100,000 residents within the district. The last reported number was right about 1,470 confirmed cases per 100,000, and that is down just slightly again from the peak of about 1,700, which was about a week and a half ago. And then we've shown this slide the last several months. This is just a heat map showing all the zip codes within the county that really just reinforces the past several slides that across the entire county there's been a significant increase in cases. And although it appears maybe we've reached that peak, that they're just at the very beginning to come down. Looking specifically at our Francis Howell School District data that was on the dashboard, this was yesterday evening. You know, with the new rolling average that on each day when staff and students are eligible to come back to school, those cases come off of the dashboard in the morning, so the numbers are lower and then go up throughout the day. So this was the data as of 9 p.m. yesterday on the dashboard. At that time, we had 331 current positive cases in the district, 272 of those being students and 59 staff. 66 of the active cases were listed as potentially being linked to school exposure. And that's through our contact tracing interview process when we ask the positive student or staff member or family where they were believed they were exposed, and we go through that process that we believe that it was linked to school, either in a classroom, on a bus, or potentially in the lunchroom. And of those 66 cases that were on there yesterday, 55 of those were students and 11 were staff. The overall numbers, if you look at the dashboard right now, are slightly lower. We've been here the last several hours, so when I do a final update for today, they're right about the same at the end of today. Looking at our cumulative data this year, we've had 2,640 total positive cases reported since we began school back at the end of August. 2,223 of those being students and 417 staff. Throughout the year, 366 of those have been identified as potentially related to school exposure. Since we returned just about 3 weeks ago, we have had 1,929 cases. So 85% of the entire number of cases we've had this school year we have dealt with over the past 3 weeks. And I just want to take one moment with that just to, again, thank and emphasize that even though we're not doing the full contact tracing process of the 6-foot diameter and looking at the seating charts in every single classroom, that for every one of these cases, it involved the person that received the phone call and the information from the family member or the parent, the student, did the initial interview, then did the tracing at the building level of looking which classes those students are in, what sports they might be in, team activities, buses, and then the communication out to our families. And so I just, all year and last year we've said the amount of time that our staff puts into this work, but it's been really incredible. It's nurses, it's building administrators, building information specialists, and other AAs supporting this work at the building level, and then the team doing this at the district level. When we look within the past 3 weeks, 1,600 of those have been students and just under 300 staff, and then 256 of the cases since we have returned have been reported as potential school exposure. So this slide, I've shown you the number of positive cases the past few months as a measure of the overall enrollment. So when we begin to talk about tonight's recommendation that includes a threshold for when we would trigger putting masks back on the students in a building, we've talked about that 3% level. This was as of last night. So you see here that John Weldon was our one school building that was still over 3% and had been for 3 or more days in a row. It also shows the admin building. However, on this specific chart, that includes admin, transportation, Burbis, and the FOB. So we would continue to look at those as separate buildings, not as one total. To give you some context, though, on Tuesday of this week, we had 4 buildings that were at 3 or more days at 3% or higher. And if we go back to Tuesday of last week, we had 9 schools. And so our data is beginning to look better. The numbers are coming down. They are still high. The number of cases that are falling off each day tends to be right about the same or just a little bit lower than the number we're adding on. So our net number of cases, like I said, although it's come down from the peak of where we were at early last week, which was over 500 total cases, 469 students and 68 staff on one day, they're still over 300. And so we're hoping that we've also reached a peak similar to the county and that those numbers will continue to come down. So when we talk about the threshold recommendation, the idea would be that when this goes into effect, we would return to being mask optional district-wide, and when a specific building has over 3% of their student and staff population at 3% higher positivity rate for 3 consecutive days, that would automatically trigger that building putting masks back on. Any building that is not at that point would still have a mask optional policy, and the rest of the pieces would still be in place that we talked about last month, that we're not excluding students anymore or staff as close contacts, that they would still be allowed to stay. For household contacts, they are encouraged to isolate and quarantine if necessary, but it is not a requirement. Students and staff who are positive and or symptomatic are kept home and excluded from school, and that's under our communicable disease policy. That's specifically our positive cases. That we are notifying our parents and families when there are positive cases in the classroom. Some of our buildings have piloted doing that as a building-wide communication as opposed to class by class, and so we're still looking at that. And that's really a function of, given the high number of cases, recognizing the hundreds of emails that are going out each day just to streamline that process. At this time, we're still under a federal mask mandate on transportation through March, and so that will be there until that is changed at the federal level. And then the other change is that we would add a column to our dashboard that would show the current positivity rate based on the number of cases. Since that would be a data point that we'd be using moving forward, we would want that on the dashboard so that people would be able to view it. How the process would work is that there would be a letter set up so that when a building had 2 consecutive days at 3% or higher in the afternoon, we think between 4 and 5 o'clock, an email would be generated to all of the families, staff, and students at the high school level of that building, letting them know that we have had 2 days, and that if the rate is over 3% the following day, that the mask requirement would go back into place on day 4. That gives people notice to be prepared for it and then also to watch for it, so that communication is out there. Once the temporary mask requirement would be put back in place, that it would be there for 10 school days. On the 10th day, if they are below 3%, the requirement would be dropped. If they're still above 3%, then it would remain in place for another 5 days, and it would be reviewed on each 5th day. And again, at whatever point it would go below the 3%, it would fall off, and then it would stay off until that building might reach or exceed 3% again for 3 consecutive days. We continue to monitor the data on a daily basis. We're still looking at some of our other mitigation strategies that are in place. So when we're talking about holding larger events or big scale events during the school day, can they be done virtually? Can they be postponed? Can they be done in a manner that allows us to distance students and staff to the extent possible? And then for our athletics and activities, we continue to follow the MSHA requirements, which they have updated to reflect the most recent guidelines around a 5-day stay-at-home isolation period for positive cases, and then following individual districts' requirements when it comes to whether or not they have close contacts and they're keeping them home. I can answer questions that you may have.
I have more of a statement. I've been seeing a lot of people on social media talking about sending children to school when people in their home have COVID. I just want to request from our community, let's use some common sense. If you have a positive COVID case in your home, please don't send your children to school. They may not be symptomatic, but they may be asymptomatic and spreading. So I just wanted to put that out there, that please be responsible so we can get through this.
Thank you, Dr. Rumpus. I have a question. Given the fact that we're still in the throes of this Omicron and everything, has any consideration been given to keeping the mask mandate for like another 2 weeks and then looking at this as being in, two more weeks and then going to this program? Has that even been considered?
We continue to explore and consider all options every day as we look at the data and look at what's happening. The guidance we heard from the Board of Education when we met on January 7th was that would like information to look at what a threshold marker would look like so that we could respond to individual buildings as opposed to necessarily having a mask mandate or requirement in place for the entire district. And so we provided that information tonight as a talking point.
I want to thank you for all the hard work and effort you've put into this. I mean, I can't even imagine how many hours you've spent over the sort of last 2 years. All I've done was read hundreds or thousands of emails on it, but I feel like I'm starting to get to be an expert, but they're all contradictory, so it's kind of difficult to figure out who's right and who's not. So, I mean, you're our expert of the district. I trust your recommendations. I trust the data you have here. Unlike other districts in this county, when you look at their dashboards, I'll just leave it at that. There's other districts that I don't know where they're getting their numbers from, but they're not accurate. So I trust you. I trust your information. I like the laser focus on this, like it's 3% is this building, and that we're very targeted for one area, so we're not blanketing the entire district, or masking up the entire district if we only have a problem in 1 or 2 buildings. The question I have is, when I did the quick math, I mean, 20%, we're seeing almost a 20% school spread on our recent data, just the way I calculated it, and I could be off. Is this recommendation the same as of yesterday? I mean, I know this is a very fluid, fluctuating, point. So are you comfortable with this, or is there something you'd like to change or add at this point in time?
So I will say that previously when we presented talking about the rate of school spread and we had a percentage number that we were using, at that time that was based on our numerator was the number of cases that had been connected to a school exposure. Our denominator was out of all of the close contacts that we had in place. So standard quarantines, modified quarantines, we're able to use that. We no longer have that number because since we stopped contact tracing and excluding close contacts, we don't have it. So we don't have a good comparison. So the percentages that you're using are looking at just what percentage of the number of total positive cases we have had in the district are currently believed to be related to school spread. So I don't want anybody to think that we've gone from 1.75 to 2% for the last year and a half, that's jumped to 20, because that's comparing 2 different numbers. But yes, the comparison that you are making, is up in the middle teens of the percentages currently. When we wrote this recommendation, it was last week in preparation for the Board of Education meeting, and we provide that to you and to the public ahead of time. And so that was looking at the data as of that point, but not knowing where we would be a week later. This was put into place 2 weeks ago, and we wanted to have 2 weeks of data to look at, because that data, the first week we were back, was really based on the winter holiday. Really, with the data we're just seeing this week would be reflective of what's been happening in our buildings since we've been back based on the exposure timelines. One option is to continue having masks or mask requirement in place for another week or two as we watch the county data continue to come down. There is promising reports when you read, even the Post-Dispatch had an article today speaking to the number of hospitalizations in the St. Louis area, that they seem to have peaked and have started to come down. That's what our county data indicates. We just have not had enough time yet to show that we're really significantly coming down either within the county or within the district. So to consider, is there an extension of a mask requirement and then switching to this threshold when that would end automatically. Part of bringing the threshold to the Board of Education for approval is that right now, under the statute and the way we're operating, that we have to come to you each 30 days to make a decision if we change our mitigation strategies, and because we had dropped it, we had to hold the emergency meeting. So the other option is that we put something in place for a few days, and then depending on how things change or go up or down, that we would have to come back to the Board of Education for a special or an emergency meeting each time we felt that there was a building or the entire district where we would need to change the masking requirement. And we're just trying to avoid that and provide some level of understanding for our board and for all of our parents and students around this is what the expectation is with the numbers, and this is how our mitigation strategies would change based on those numbers moving forward.
So I kind of like the idea. I know it's not going to be very popular with everybody, but we are still at some of the highest numbers that we have seen in the last 2 years. It started coming down, but it's not down. They're still at some of the highest that we've seen. So I would definitely be in support of extending for 2 weeks and then automatically going to this new program after that time period.
I appreciate all the updates and all the work and stuff that goes in this, and I have some notes that I had for myself here, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'd like to amend this motion that we continue the current mask mandate for all students, staff, and visitors in all FHSD buildings during school hours, including vacation station, until February 4th, so 2 weeks. Well, yeah, for 2 weeks. With the way we currently are operating right now, for 2 more weeks.
So I guess discussion on that is what happens in 2 weeks. We don't have another board meeting in 2 weeks. Are we going to have an emergency meeting again? I mean, it shouldn't be an emergency at that point. With our COVID numbers are following what's happening in other countries across the world, odds are in 2 weeks we're going to be in a way better place than we are right now. And so if we do approve it this way, I would like to see us be able to just simply move forward in 2 weeks without you having to come back to the board to make that decision then. Correct. So
Yeah,
I would support this plan.
I agree. Emergency meetings and special meetings, that's really what we are trying to avoid. I think we could just clarify with this amended motion, a mandate for 2 more weeks, then transitioning to the plan that's been presented after that date. That's an option that the board has.
And that would avoid a special meeting?
Yeah, we would then have your approval as a board, really in an ongoing way. We've got the mandate for 2 more weeks, if that's what you choose to do, and your permission then to switch to that tiered approach after that. We would still need, as long as there's any mask requirements out there, even in tiered form, we would still come back at each regular monthly meeting and reaffirm keeping that in place. You know, say it was a 3% threshold, we would still need the board to vote on that each month. But if your motion tonight were to be a 2-week extension of current practices with masks, followed by adopting this tiered strategy that was presented tonight, that would be a vote that could carry us to the next regular board meeting without calling you back each time. And there's always the option that if something crazy changes, we could be compelled to come back, for a conversation on any unforeseen things that happen. But if everything proceeds as everything seems to be pointing that it would, we'd be ready to move forward with that plan without additional board action.
So procedurally, Mr. Lang, I think as maker of the motion, you can accept Mrs. Walker's suggestion for amendment to your amendment?
Yes.
I'm trying to help
I'm trying to scribble down too to get it
I'm trying to help
exactly
Mrs.
right
Hepler keep track of what.
Agree, and I think we need to vote on the amendment
Yeah,
before
so
we can vote on the actual
If Mr. Lang
motion.
is agreeable to your amendment, then the board would vote on the amendment, and then you would have to vote on the original motion as amended.
Two votes, one for the amendment, one for the approval.
So Mr. Lang, do you agree to the changes to the
Yes.
amendment? Okay, any more discussion on this amended motion? No? Okay, so all in favor of to amend the motion? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Mr. Lang, could you read that motion again?
We continue the current mask mandate for all students, staff, and visitors in FHSD buildings during school hours, including vacation station, until February 4th. February 7th, we return to mask optional, 2 weeks. Mask optional policy for all students, staff, and visitors in the buildings, and approve from that date forward, reinstating a mask requirement for any building, the original recommendation, basically. With when the positive cases exceed 3% of the building's population of students and staff for 3 consecutive days. Is it clear as mud?
No, that's clear.
That's clear from our point of view.
We need a second on that? We have a second? Okay. Okay. All right. So any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the COVID-19 leave for employees as presented. Dr. Hoven?
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to bring this proposal tonight. As we've gone through all of our COVID data tonight, you've seen that obviously this time we've come back since winter break has looked a lot different than the rest of the school year. So we did not start this school year with any COVID leave available for our staff. We did promise that we would monitor that and keep an eye on how much it was happening. And fortunately, through the fall semester, it was really relatively low. We did not have near as many staff missing due to COVID, and often when they did, they were able to complete their duties from home and not have to use their leave. So we were pleased overall to see a positive trend. However, once we've returned from break, it's been a completely different story. We've had a much higher number of our staff have to miss time at work, and not just for themselves. That often includes children that they have to care for and things like that as well. So we do believe it is absolutely time to go back and take a look at that. One challenge that we have is that typically when an employer has COVID leave, you often see needing proof provided, medical documentation, notes from doctors, things like that to provide evidence of COVID positivity. Unfortunately, as we're all aware, finding a test at all has been problematic, if not completely impossible. We've also seen a large shift to just at-home testing, especially when people don't get terribly ill. They're often just using an at-home test as opposed to getting into a medical facility to get a test. So we believe that at this time, asking our staff to have to provide evidence of a test is not practical and is not the best way to proceed with our staff. So the proposal in front of you tonight is to give all of our staff 5 additional days of leave. We believe that this will have a positive effect in a couple of ways. For staff, even if they were among the much smaller number, but people who already experienced leave in the fall, this would replenish those leave days into their account. Those who have recently had it or will have it in the future and miss time at work because of it will have these days available to them. So without being able to and reasonably asking employees to be able to provide evidence, we believe this is the best path forward to show our staff that we have been watching. We do see what's going on with COVID. We do understand the impact it is having on their ability to be at work and their ability to take care of their own sick leave balances, into the future. So we are asking tonight for the board's approval of this approach.
So I have a question. Is this something that has been worked through with FHEA? Have the staff participated in this? I know that something like this often would be something that's negotiated. Where is that at?
So we didn't enter into a negotiation setting with this, but we did discuss this with all of our employee groups.
You may have stated this, but is this retroactive, applied retroactively?
So it's retroactive in the sense that it does provide leave, which if someone already had those absences, this leave will replenish their bank of sick leave. The other thing we did include in this, and I should have mentioned this when I first said it, is we have included an appeal in here. It is possible that an employee went into dock time or had more than 5 days out because of COVID, and so we've included an ability to appeal here. And so yes, it's retroactive because it will replenish sick days that they've already used. You know, so if they got their account down to only 1 sick day, this would get them back up to 6. So yes, it covers them retroactively in that way. If their absence sent them into dock time, we've included the ability to appeal so we can make it fully retroactive for those individuals.
So they can retroactively appeal if
Yes.
they've... Okay.
Yes, if they had an absence, you know, from a previous time in the year, we would ask them to appeal that, and we will look at those on a case-by-case basis.
And then how it's retroactively applied, do we have standards for that, or is that something that you've discussed with employee groups as well?
I would defer to Mr. Supple to answer that. I think we have processes, you know, outside of COVID, there are times that things like this occur, and we work with individual employees to make them whole. So I can let him talk to specifics on that.
Trying to be sensitive to that, I'm sorry. We had a lot of conversation with the executive cabinet around how we would approach this, and part of the desire here with this recommendation is to make it easily manageable. So having it becomes difficult to say that it's going to be retroactive, that retroactive pay would be applied to everybody who encountered dock time, because there are so many circumstances that might cause an employee to be away from work. So an employee could have chosen to use 3 of their sick days for personal leave, and then they got sick, and then they ran out of days, and then they got dock time. So are we reimbursing them for personal days that they used? An employee could have had an extended leave for a reason other than COVID. And so I think that the appeals process allows us to approach it on an individual case-by-case basis, with the intention being to provide some remedy for people who legitimately worked as much as they could, but encountered situations that caused them to be absent from work that were directly related to COVID. That would be, we would be able to take a look at their record and see that and make some provision there. But in the course of 2,200 employees, there's a variety of ways that people choose to use their leave, and so it's very difficult to apply a blanket policy to all employees. I think Mrs. Simpkins would also like to.
Mr. Ziegermeyer, I think this also gives our employees a little bit of some option by providing the 5 days. If an employee had experienced COVID leave and their sick leave balances were low, we'll add the days to their bank. If they did have pay docked in the past, they can write to us and we can look at that individually and reimburse them for that dock time up to those 5 days. Or they may choose that I've already experienced that, I couldn't purchase what I wanted to purchase during that time, and now I'm excited that I might have some extra days in my bank for future illnesses. So it gives everyone a little bit of control over what works personally and what works best for them, whether it is I really need you to give me that pay for the 5 days that I missed because I need to catch up on something, or I'm okay, I dealt with that, but I may have a future absence and now I won't have to deal with that again. So as those in our communication to employees, we'll make it clear that if they did have some dock time in the past, they can write to us. We'll verify that that was a COVID-related illness, and we'll work with them whichever way they need us to, whether that is reimbursing them for that dock time or allowing that future leave to stay in their bank. So I think it does give them some option.
Yeah, I just want to thank administration, because when this first came up, they said that we're not offering it right now. It's not a necessary item, but we'll continue to review this, and if it comes up that it's necessary, we'll bring it to the board. You know, they fulfilled their promise to us. They fulfilled their promise to the staff of the district by following through on that promise, and this came to a head. They needed to do it. They brought it forward, and I'm very pleased to follow their recommendation to provide this service to our employees.
Board, any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the 2022-23 staffing plan as presented.
Second.
Ms. Simpkins.
Thank you. Board, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the recommended staffing plan for the 22-23 school year with you. I am pleased to say that this plan does not include any additional staffing reductions as we had projected last year. If any reductions are necessary to eliminate deficit spending, we will consider other areas of our budget to make that happen. Just to share with you a little bit of our process, we really began talking about staffing in early October. Mr. Delaney, our Director of Human Resources, and we meet with each district administrator to develop an initial staffing plan that is reviewed and modified by full cabinet and executive cabinet over the course of many months. After that, we share the plan with cabinet, with principals, and with the leadership of our employee groups, just so they have some idea of what we're thinking about and how we're moving forward. We always talk a little bit about contingency staffing each year. And I wanted to share with you that we've done things just a little bit differently this year. Contingency staffing are positions that you approve that we hold, we don't plan to use, but we will use if it's needed. If we have a kindergarten class, a kindergarten class at a particular elementary school that has much higher enrollment than what we expected, we're able to quickly add a position to stay within the DESE guidelines without coming back to you and asking for an additional position at the next board meeting. So it allows us to be flexible right at that time in July and August when we're looking at making sure we have the right number of teachers in our classrooms. Typically, any used contingency staffing that we used in one year carried over to the next year, and the contingency staffing that we did not use was eliminated. This year, in an effort to really be transparent and show you a status quo staffing plan, we removed the contingency staffing that we used this year. So we took those numbers out of our staffing, and so what you will really see tonight, as close as we could be, are FTE numbers that are the same as what we proposed for the 21-22 school year being carried over for 22-23. So that the contingency that we used this year goes back into that contingency pot in case we need it again for the coming school year, but it's not continued in our overall balances. I always want to share that we monitor the use of that contingency very, very heavily. Our building administrators will tell you when they call and ask for additional staff, we really ask them, well, what else can we do? And how can we look at that? And what other modifications can we make in the schedule? Or just to really talk through that before we just use what you've provided. So it is heavily scrutinized every time it is requested. So we broke down the staffing plan into 3 major areas, and so we'll start with the certified side first. So good news, we will have status quo staffing district-wide for all of our certified staff. There are no reductions in the number of FTEs that we are requesting. Now, with that said, we will move staffing from building to building based on enrollment. So it doesn't mean that a particular building will have the exact same number of staffing as they did this year. They might have lower enrollment and another building might have higher. And so we will move those classroom positions based on enrollment. That will also go with reading positions, reading teaching positions, as well as our special education positions. As we look at the needs across the district and we look at reading data, we may move positions from one building to another, but overall the number of positions in the district will stay the same. What that means for our elementary folks, just is the average class sizes that you'll see here. I show you the MSIP desirable and the MSIP maximum in comparison. So we will have class sizes that will range from 17 students in a classroom all the way up to 27 students in a classroom at a 5th grade level. So there still are some pockets that will be higher than the averages that you see here. And you know, in previous years when we had more resources, we were able to really manage those high expected numbers a little bit earlier in the plan, but we'll monitor those as we see enrollment come through, and we will use that contingency if those class sizes get too high to that maximum. It is very, very difficult to determine or project any type of a class size at the secondary level at middle school and high school. So we create a staffing plan based on classroom teacher to student ratio. It isn't class size. This isn't going to tell you that there are 22 kids on average in a 6th grade, 7th grade, or 9th grade classroom. What it does is tell you the number of students compared to the number of classroom teachers in the building. The reason we do this is the way that we do this is then to provide the FTE to our high school principals and our middle school principals, who will then utilize the FTE, look at student enrollment in courses, look at the number of students in that total that might be placed in other areas like special education, virtual learning, things of that nature. And they will determine how to best utilize that FTE to stay within the class size ranges that you see here from DESE. And again, we'll utilize contingency staffing if our enrollment projections are off. But it's just so difficult at this point to say that there is a specific class size. So we do use the ratio to determine how to spread out that staffing across those buildings this early in the game. And then in early childhood, I just want to talk a little bit about that. We are requesting 2 positions be added at the early childhood special education level. The 2 positions are funded by the special education grant and will allow us to support those students that have high needs early in the game. And there really is no change to our tuition-based early childhood programs. So for early childhood, we have minimal changes. And those that are being added will be covered by our special education grants. So we'll move over to support staff. This plan does include just a small additional FTE to support a special education paraprofessional position. It is just a 0.3 as we were able to reallocate some FTE to support the para position, but we were short just a little bit, and so we're asking you to approve that additional 0.33 so that we can have that position to support our student needs. This position, like the teaching position, will also be funded by the special education grants. I wanted to just make a note as you look at the memo from maybe last year and look at the FTE that we requested and look at what we are asking for this year. I just wanted to remind you that we came back to you in April and in May for additional FTEs for these positions, cafeteria 8 hours, and the additional interpreter. So there was a slight increase in the FTE throughout the year, and that's why those numbers won't match exactly. So those were board-approved FTEs that were added throughout the school year. And then in our tuition-based programs, we are just asking for a small FTE increase to support our parent-educator programs. This will help us serve our families that request the service, our earliest learners that are in the home, so our parent educators can meet with those parents and provide good services for them. This is an hourly position, and this is a part-time position, which would increase services about 19 hours per week for our community. So overall, certified staffing stays status quo, and we'll just reallocate the positions based on enrollment. In early childhood and in early childhood special education, it is an increase of 2 teachers, and those costs will be covered by the special education grant. And then on the support staff side, we're increasing by that 0.67 FTE. It's a 0.33 increase, but a position. And then that will also be covered by the grant. And then the para-educator position, which will be an increase to the district of approximately $15,000 overall. So very small changes to the staffing plan. but glad that there aren't any reductions in this plan and that we'll be able to keep the staffing levels that we are in. I think as we met with building principals, what we heard is we don't have enough people. You know, our class sizes are higher, the behavior needs are there. I think when there is a time that we have the resources available, looking at the supports that we have, we are such a people-intense business. And if there is ever that time that we can provide some of those additional supports, I think that would relieve a lot of stress on our teachers, but I understand that we have to have the right resources to be able to do that. And this is a plan that at least keeps our staff intact so that we can move forward status quo for right now. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Board, any questions, comments?
I have a question, and I apologize for not getting this for you sooner. In here, I don't see anything in reference to our permanent substitutes, and I know that everybody in the country, in the world, seems like they're having problems filling sub-vacancies. I know we talked about increasing that. Is that still the same? Have we looked at possibly increasing that to help us out with our subs, or how is that figured into this?
So it is just figured in as status quo. We have 12 permanent substitute positions in the district. I will tell you, just like paraprofessionals and custodians, we're struggling to fill those positions. We have 8 of them filled right now. In fact, this year, when we had some certified positions that we did not need for enrollment, we tried to use those for a short time this year to increase the number of permanent subs, thinking we could maybe increase up to 16. And we have yet to be able to keep the 12 that we had because of the staffing, the labor shortages. So in order to present to you a status quo plan, there are 12 permanent subs in the plan. Those 12 subs are sent out based on need each and every morning. So when we offer the position, we explain to those folks that they have to have extreme flexibility and go wherever they might be needed. I will tell you right now, the critical need has been at elementary, and many of them are being placed at elementary. Elementary doesn't have the same resources as maybe a middle school or high school when it comes to no-fills. So yes, I think at some point in time it would be fabulous if we could increase the number of permanent subs, and I think it needs to be at a time when there's not a national labor shortage and we have great qualified people that are applying. But this particular plan keeps it at 12.
So the question I have is, the positions that are not filled, could we take the dollars from those positions to increase what some of our folks that are not making as much as they need to be making for the positions they're in?
So that's what we did with the stipends that we brought to you last month. We utilized the money that we have the salary that we have not used in those positions we haven't filled to find a cost-neutral way to offer some sort of an increase to our current employees. And so that plan is just now getting underway. January was the first, I think it was January, forgive me. There's a payment coming here soon. I think the first one comes on the February 10th paycheck. So that is what we did this year. Our hope would be that things swing in our direction, that more staff would be available and we'll be able to fill the positions that we have available moving into the next school year. But I think that's definitely something we could have conversation about if we find ourselves in the same place next year with the same number of openings. Then we can have that conversation next year as well with some sort of a stipend or a way to use that salary that we're not using.
I'm just kind of wondering if there's anything that we can do sooner than next year.
Well, I think that, conversations throughout negotiations might help as we have conversation, whether that's salary talks or things of that nature. That would be an opportunity if the district has the resources to provide salary increases. That'll be a good time for us to have that conversation. And, I know that the dollar amount as part of your compensation is really what is speaking to folks right now. We try very hard in our recruiting efforts to talk about the value of the benefits that the board provides, the retirement, the schedule, all the great things, the culture, the climate, working with kids, all of the wonderful things that is to offer. But that almighty dollar is absolutely speaking. And not only are we competing with other school districts, but we're competing with Target and Walmart and McAllister's, who are offering high wages for work that's not as hard. And so I do think we really have to have that conversation when we get into negotiations about the salary that we're offering if we want to be able to attract high quality people.
Thank you. My next question is, where are we with negotiations? Do we have negotiations scheduled with the different groups, or where are we?
Yeah, we do have dates on the calendar with our Teamster groups. Mr. Delaney and the FISPA group are working to finalize a calendar for negotiations with our support staff groups. And we have reached out to FHEA to get some dates scheduled. They have indicated that they would prefer to wait until after the April board election to begin any kind of negotiations. So we will wait to get some dates from them before we move forward. That's Teamsters, and those are scheduled, yes. We just opened for salary with Teamsters this year. We have a 2-year agreement, so those are already on the books and scheduled.
Lisa, this is an aside question, and I'm confused as I try to read. Are retired teachers and staff able to work above their 550 hours still, or is that now?
It just ended.
It just ended.
It just ended on December
renewed.
on December 31st, and so now the 550-hour rule begins on January 1st. So you start counting January 1st, 550 hours through June 30th, and then that 550-hour rule will roll over July 1, and then July 1 to June 30th, a retiree can work 550 hours. So the governor had paused that. You could work as much as you wanted, but that ended on December 31st.
Anything else, board? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now go to our calendar presentation. Ms. Simpkins.
I shouldn't have touched it. I'm sorry. I don't know that it's that. Okay, so this is the 2023-2024 school year calendar. We're presenting it today in workshop just to have some conversation about what we plan, and then we will bring the calendar back to you next month for an official vote to approve the calendar, unless you want to provide any direction to make any changes. So we can do that as well. The 2023-2024, remember we're 2 years out. So we just talked about staffing for next year, but we are talking about a calendar that's 2 years out. It cannot start before August 21st. You may remember that the legislation was added on July 11th of 2019, barring us from starting the school year more than 14 days before the first Monday in September. And that was a significant shift in our culture here in Francis Howell. It really did reduce a lot of the flexibility that we had in our calendar. In prior years, an earlier start date allowed for longer winter breaks, an earlier end of the school year, and some of that flexibility is gone. So the proposed calendar, the calendar that was sent out to the community and to our staff with our survey, had school starting on Tuesday, August 22nd, with a return from winter break on Monday, January 2nd. And after reviewing comments in the survey, the calendar that is actually will be presented to you, has our first day of school being Monday, August 21st, so that Monday, January 2nd could be included in winter break for staff and students. So many comments that winter break wasn't long enough. It was difficult to come back that first Monday, January 2nd, really wanting that to be included in winter break. And so there's always a give and take in the calendar. So in order to have that day off, we had to adjust the start date to kind of keep those semesters and quarters as equal as we could as well. And so we will start on a Monday. Other comments about the start of the school year were, if you are going to start on a Tuesday, you might as well start on a Monday. What is really desired in our community and staff is that we start on a Wednesday or a Thursday with a short week, and that's just very difficult with this legislation and this start date. So the calendar that you will vote on will have school starting on Monday, August 21st. So we created, our practice is that we convene a calendar committee whenever there is a significant change being considered to the calendar. So when we created the 2021 and the 21-22 school year calendars, we did form a committee, a large committee that really worked through what that process was going to look like with a new start date because of the legislation we reviewed. The 22-23 and the 23-24 calendars really follow that exact same format with only the minor tweaks of where things might fall because of weekends or holidays. And so we did not convene a committee for this calendar. But we did seek input from FHEA. This really is the teacher work calendar, and with other groups, we provide that work calendar to get their input. We did the same with FHEA. And then once the calendar was created, we sent it out for survey to all of our community and our staff to get some feedback. And now we're presenting it to you today in workshop. These calendar parameters are provided with the survey just to give some context and some information as to why we do the things that we do and what really limits our flexibility in the calendar. I'm hopeful it helps people understand what we work through when we create our calendar. So this is in your onboard docs, I think, the full parameter sheet that we provide. But this is just a sample of kind of what is provided so that our staff and our community know what we're working through. Okay, so some of the big ideas in our calendar. Our returning teachers will begin work on August 14th, and students will return on August 21st. We'll have equal semesters and quarters. The recommended calendar allows for the best distribution of days so that those quarters and semesters are as equal as possible. 85 and 84 semester days, 42, 43, 41, 43 will be our quarter days. Fall break is included, and the 5-day break is attached to PD, a PD day, so that it just kind of reduces those intermittent days off that families are trying to deal with no school. You know, fall break is always a huge thing to be commented on, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the comments, but I just wanted to tell you how much of a retention tool fall break is. I've had conversations with teachers that have said, well, I won't leave Francis Howell because I love fall break. And it's such an ingrained part of our culture that it really is a strong retention tool. So I think most of our staff enjoy that break, and so we continue to keep it in the calendar. The election days continue to be non-student contact days for reasons of safety and parking and just the displacement of students. Oftentimes our gymnasiums are used and PE can't be held, or our common areas are used. So those days will continue to be non-student contact days. Winter break is included, and it is scheduled for 7 weekdays, 12 days total, which is a little different, a little shorter than what we've had in our history. First semester will end on January 12th. Students will come back and have 6 school days to review their content before they would have finals on January 11th and 12th, much like we have lived this year and in the past. Spring break is 1 week. It's the same as our region, our surrounding districts. I try to reach out to them. Some are not as early as creating their calendars as we are in Francis Howell, but we all are really trying to find that sweet spot for spring break, just so that those families that have maybe work in one district, have students in another, can have a similar spring break. It's also helpful for some of our county-wide programs so that students that maybe attend Lewis and Clark aren't on different schedules with those programs. And then this year, this particular year, spring break will line up very nicely with Easter Sunday and the election day in April, so it'll kind of all fall together. We do end the school year before Memorial Day if there is no snow. And our high schools will work to set an earlier date for seniors due to the graduation date. Our snow days, we're still kind of evaluating what that looks like this year. So our snow day committee created a plan for this year, and so far it's going swimmingly well. We haven't had a snow day yet. And we're into January, knock on wood. But we really wanted to live that and understand what those snow days felt like, making up 3, forgiving a few, that sort of a thing. So it does just kind of say right now to be determined on how we'll adjust the snow days, just so we can kind of see what that will look like this year. And then our PD days for our teachers, our professional development days, are part of this calendar. There are 6 days in our contract and with our teachers, and we really try to spread those days out. We know that learning is best when teachers can learn and then put into practice what they learned. So those days are included in the calendar as well. Approximately 92% of our staff and 90% of the community responded either neutral, satisfied, or very satisfied with the overall calendar. And so we had some good feedback in our survey, and I think people are getting used to this schedule and they feel comfortable with it. This was just a chart. When we originally sent out the calendar, we asked some questions about should we start on the Tuesday and do some changes with winter break and the last school day. We gave 3 different options. And while the feedback from that was to leave the calendar as is, the comments about that January 2nd date were really strong. And so it ended up that we still moved that start date to Monday in order to extend the winter break. So this information we were really kind of asking start on a Tuesday, go past Memorial Day, thinking that was what was important to the community, but the comments really showed us that it was that January 2nd date that was most important. So we've adjusted it based on those comments and not so much on this particular question of the survey. These are the areas that were most discussed from the community. Like I said, fall break, you have comments saying it's not long enough, please extend it to get rid of it altogether. And it's almost, they're just constant, and where fall break is placed and how close can we have it to Halloween, and just, it is a point of conversation every survey. So it's in there. I think the majority of our respondents from our community, and you'll see from staff, really feel like fall break is important in our culture, and so the decision was to leave fall break in the calendar. Winter break, several comments just that it's not long enough. It is a week, and in the past in Francis Howell, we've had more like a 2-week winter break, and we just don't have that flexibility any longer. But that winter break is there, and we did extend it to add that January 2nd date. And then, of course, the start of the school year is always commented on. There was a lot of conversation about what can we do to change the legislation so we have that flexibility back. There was some question about an exemption, but that exemption, it was really only for the 2020-2021 school year when we were really dealing with the pandemic. So we are required to follow the legislation and start 14 days after the Monday. So that is why we're starting on Monday, the 21st. Staff talked a little bit about the same winter break, fall break, and the start of school, and just had a lot of questions about how we would handle snow days, and we'll continue to monitor that this year. So as we went through the survey, these were the things that we took into consideration. The start of the school year, we moved that back to Monday. We did move the week of fall break. That was one other change that I wanted to share with you from the original calendar that went into the survey compared to what will be presented to you. When we placed fall break on the original calendar, where we would always place it, students would have returned to school on Halloween. And so there was just a lot of staff that said, that's just not a great idea to have kids on break for a whole week and then come back to school on Halloween. And we appreciate that. So we did move fall break to a week earlier in October to separate it from Halloween. We talked a lot about, do we move it later and have Halloween part of fall break? but then it really pushed, it didn't leave a lot of time between fall break and Thanksgiving, and it really pushed those breaks together. We had conversation about, should we move it to Thanksgiving? All of those things really would have required a calendar committee to have, those are big, big changes, and we would have wanted further input. So we just decided to put some separation between fall break and Halloween and place fall break where it traditionally was in the month of October before we made the changes. It'll just be a little bit earlier. But I think that will be good for our staff. As we know, stress starts to increase at that time. We'll be ready for fall break. We'll have fall break, have it separated from Halloween, and it'll still be separated from the Thanksgiving break that we have. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the calendar and the changes that we made from the proposed calendar to what we will present to you for a vote next month.
Board, any questions, comments?
Sorry, I thought it was on. My question is, do our breaks still align with the other districts in the county? I know that was a really important thing that we'd been working on.
Spring break, yes. So I've reached out to those districts. I've asked them when they plan for their spring break. For those that knew it, yes, spring break is aligned. Other districts don't really provide a full fall break. Some offer a couple days here, a couple of days there, or a longer Thanksgiving. And winter break is typically around the holidays, so I think we're fairly close there. Yep.
Anything else, board, before we move to Dr. Buckman? Dr. Buckman. Thanks, Lisa.
I'm happy to be there.
Guys, ready for the highlight of your evening? You've been waiting all night. We saved the best for last. Before I get started, I want to just take a minute to give credit to a couple people. So David Brothers is at the podium. David is our Director of Curriculum and Assessment, and part of his role is communicating with the state to stay on top of all the changes and how our data is collected, how our data is reported, the data releases, taking all those first looks at the data from the state and then comparing them to our internal measures and identifying any areas of concern, and then working with the state on any appeals that we have. And then Zach Brady, who's not here tonight, he's our district information specialist, and this dynamic duo, they're really the wizards behind all of the number crunching that you'll see tonight in the charts. So just wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out. And David's gonna hang at the podium there in case you guys have any questions, and he offers just a great perspective to the work. So in a typical school year, this workshop really does focus on our APR, our annual performance report. And as you know, the state grades us on the 5 areas that you see listed here on the slide. So our academic achievement, our subgroup achievement, our college and career readiness, our attendance, and then also our graduation rate. And that information is then reported out on a report card to the community, and then the state uses it for our accreditation. Because of the impact that COVID had on the 2021 school year, the state decided that they weren't going to provide us the normal calculations and that formal APR that they typically issue. However, they did decide that they would still release all the data points with not just to the district, but also publicly. Oops, sorry, forgot to click. And so typically we bring all of the information in just one presentation. Last year, because we didn't have the state data, because of COVID obviously, we focused mostly on our local data, just some internal district measures. And we felt like it gave you a really accurate picture of kind of the overall academic health of our district, and we liked that. And so this year we decided that we want to continue to bring that local information, but we also wanted to bring the state data that they released. And so because we had both pieces, we felt like it made sense to kind of split it in half. And so as you can see, tonight we'll walk through what you see on the left, which is mostly our college and career readiness data. And then in February, I'll be back, woohoo, and I'll bring the second part of the data, which is what you see on the right. And that's primarily our academic data. And as an added bonus, by waiting until February to bring you the academic data, it allows our schools time to finish their winter benchmark assessments. And so I'll be able to bring you fall and winter data, where normally when I come talk to you, I only have fall. And we always say, we kind of have to wait and see what the winter data looks like. So by pushing it back a little bit, I'll actually be able to bring all of that with me. That being said, I know that everyone's very anxious to hear a little about the MAP and EOC scores. And if you're all caught up on your email, you would know that the District Digest went out at the end of last week, and in that was an article around the 2021 district level MAP and EOC comparison scores. And so I thought we'd just quickly highlight that, but again, we'll go deeper into it next month. Before I talk too much about what's on this slide, I just want to share a little about how the state handles the way that they release their data. So the state requires us to embargo all of our information until a specific date that they provide us. So this year it was December 1st. In previous years, it's been as early as October 1st. And really what that means is that internally we can review the data. We just can't talk to other districts about it. We're asked not to present it publicly. We can send home the student reports to families, but all of this kind of information, they ask us to hold on to that until the embargo date. And this really allows districts time to internally review the data, do all the work that Zach and David do, just to make sure that things make sense. And then if we have appeals, it gives us time to make those appeals to DESE. And so just as an example, this year we had over 250 ACT appeals, and it lets us get all that corrected before the data is publicly released. So that's kind of the purpose of that embargo window. And so then once December 1st rolls around, we're able to start sharing the data with our local districts, and that really starts to give us some context around how our students perform in relation to those surrounding districts. Now, I will tell you what's really unusual about this year's data is that we've heard many times that this is not the year to compare data between districts. And that really is just because of COVID. It's no secret that every district was navigating COVID and that they did it a little bit different. We had schools that were virtual, we had schools that were hybrid, districts that were hybrid, we had districts that were in person, we had districts that fluctuated between different formats. And all of that just makes it really difficult to compare scores between districts. And so at the same time, we're continually asked, how did we rank compared to other districts? So we are going to share that, but we really just want to place some heavy emphasis on the fact that it's really not the best year to be doing a whole lot of comparing. So what you'll see up on the slide there is the 7 districts that we historically compare ourselves to. So typically we compare ourselves to the other St. Charles County districts. So that would be St. Charles, Orchard Farm, Wentzville, Zumwalt. And then we also look at the St. Louis County districts that touch our boundaries. So Parkway, Rockwood, and Pattonville. And then Francis Howell would round out the group at number 8. And so when you see those rankings up there, it's kind of where that assessment group fell compared to the other, as part of that group of 8. And again, these are really just some highlights. We'll get into all the specifics next month. So as you can see, we have so much to celebrate from a year that was filled with nothing but challenges. And many times we told our teachers, the state has told us the assessments don't count, just take care of kids, take care of families, let's just make it through the year. And it's not a surprise to anyone. Not only did they do that, but as you can see, our students were still extremely successful on the state assessment. So it really is just a celebration, and we'll do more of that celebrating next month. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit, and we'll talk about, get back into those APR indicators. Tonight, primarily, we'll just look at the college and career indicator. And it's one of our APR indicators. It's also a significant portion of our strategic plan. And then this college and career readiness, the standard has multiple different areas. And so the first one we'll look at is standards 3.1 to 3.3. And this is really how our graduates score on either ACT, SAT, ASVAB, or WorkKeys. And so this slide here shows the ACT composite data that's provided to us directly from ACT. So this data is based on the last ACT score for a student, not an average, but the last. And you'll notice that Francis Howell, we outperformed both the national and the state composite scores. We did see a drop in our composite. We dropped from a 22.2 to a 21.4. But a couple things to consider. In previous years, we've done the practice ACT with our sophomores. Through budget reductions, this was something that we stopped doing. And so this group of students would be one of those first groups that didn't experience that practice ACT, and that could have had an impact on their score. We know that due to COVID protocols, our high schools paused many of the ACT support activities that they typically do, some of that building-based work, and so that definitely had an impact on it. We also know that many of our students reported it being a challenge to find an ACT to take. So many testing sites were closed or limited or canceled, including the ones that we offered. And then just anecdotally, we believe that this group of students just didn't take the ACT as repeatedly as previous groups of kids did. We know that many colleges and universities relax those entry expectations, requirements because of COVID. And so if I wasn't trying for that 1 or 2 points to get into the college I wanted, there wasn't that incentive for me to keep taking the ACT. And we know that typically the more they take it, the higher they score. And so if they're not taking it as many times, it would make sense that the score probably isn't as high. This slide is a little different. This one shows the data based on what DESE provides us. So on the last slide, I mentioned that the data we get directly from ACT is based on the last ACT score. The data that DESE provides us is based on the highest ACT score. So that's why you see a different composite there. We don't receive ACT data about other districts. So when we want to compare ourselves nationally, like we did on the previous slide, then we need to use the data that ACT gives us. When we want to compare ourselves to local districts, then we need to use the data that DESE provides us. So that's kind of why you see the two different charts there. As you look at the slide, the other thing that I would note is that we test the large majority of our students. And unless a student is taking the MAP-A or a Work Keys assessment, they're taking the ACT. And some of our neighboring districts don't do that. And so that would certainly impact our score, just the fact that we're testing all of our kids. And we still feel like that's the right thing to do. Another area within the College and Career Standard is 3.4, and that one is our advanced placement data. So this chart shows the percentage of graduates who took at least one AP course before they graduated. So you can see, well, maybe not, you can kind of see that 56% of our graduates, about 56, took at least one AP course. It's a slight increase from our previous year. We know that on average, about 80% of our graduates go to college. And our goal really is that for that group of students, they access a college level course before they graduate. And so we would consider that an AP course is primarily how they do that. Many of our students are starting to take advantage of early college. That would also be that accessing that college level course. And so that's why there's that added emphasis to those numbers there. We also look at the number of students who took an AP test, which is what you see in the pink bar, and then the number of exams that were written, which is what you see in the gray bar. And we saw a little bit of a decline in the number of kids who took an AP test, so a little over 100 students district-wide, and also a little bit of a decline in the number of exams written. And so a couple reasons that we think that might be happening. Previously, kids could decide in February or March, if they wanted to take the AP exam. So they were pretty far into the course and had a good feeling of how successful they would be. And now kids have to decide in October. And so if I'm in and it just feels like it's going to be a hard semester, I might opt out, where if I could have gotten a little further into the course previously, I might have opted in. So we think that had an impact. And talking with our high school principals, through the pandemic, they relaxed the expectations, the process to drop an AP class. And so as that process has become more lenient, they've seen more kids dropping out of the AP classes. And they really feel like that's just stress and mental health issues that kids are facing today. And so because the process to drop is easier, we're seeing kids take advantage of that, which is definitely having an impact on the scores, the numbers. And then also as more kids take advantage of early college, it's the same kids that we're kind of competing for. We would assume that will continue to have an impact on there as well. And then the last piece of data that I would share around AP is how our students scored on the assessment. So this slide shows in pink the percentage of students who scored a 3 or a higher on at least one exam. And then the gray bar shows the percent of exams where kids scored a 3 or higher. And we saw an increase in both of those numbers, which really is just a big celebration to our AP teachers. With everything going on, our kids were still extremely well prepared for those AP tests. Another area within that College and Career Standard is our post-secondary placement. So this data comes from what the kids are doing within 6 months of graduating from high school. And so as you can see here, we hover around 80% of our kids attending a 2 or a 4-year college. And then we consistently have around 12% of our graduates working after high school. And I'll do a little shameless plug here for Katie Vargas. It's just a great opportunity for me to give a little shout out to her. As you know, a big part of our strategic plan is kind of finding that balance between college and career readiness. And really our goal is that when a kid graduates, whatever their next step is, we've prepared them. Whether their plan is to go into the workforce, we've given them the skills that they need for that. And if their plan is to go to college, we've set them up for success in that area as well. And, you know, Katie is definitely college and career, but she really has worked so hard to build up the career side of things because we focused on college for so many years. And she's done a phenomenal job developing college fairs and job exploration opportunities, and she's built up this scope and sequence for each level of experiences for kids to have. And if you haven't checked out the website that she's created with the help of our school counselors, it's just amazing, and there's so many opportunities for kids on there. So if you haven't checked it out, I would invite you to do that and share it out. You'll find information about apprenticeships, career planning resources, information about our early college program is on there. There's financial aid information for families who have someone headed to college. There's military information for those who see that as their next step. And then there's recordings on there from different webinars around how to write an essay for your college application, how to apply for financial aid. There's even a career webinar from a special agent from the State Department. So it's just a great resource, and she's an awesome addition to our team. This is a new chart. So this isn't something that we've shared in the annual workshop before. It's typically shared with you in the College and Career Readiness Report. So we thought it fit well here, and we would bring it to you tonight. This is data that Missouri public colleges and universities, just the public college and universities, they report this data to Missouri Department of Higher Education. And then they then make that data available to us. And it's really just kind of an indicator of how well we're preparing our college-bound students. And so what this chart shows is how many of our graduates were required to take a remedial course when they got to college as part of their college programming. And again, it's important to note that this is only the information for kids who went to a Missouri public institution. And so if you were to look at the first row in the chart, it shows that in 2019, 85% of Francis Howell Central graduates went to college, compared to the state average of 64.2%. And in that year, about 17% of those graduates, again, who went to a Missouri public institution, about 17% of them needed a remedial math class, about 11% of them needed a remedial English class, and about 3% of them needed, remedial reading and then remedial English. And so if you scroll down to the bottom of that chart, it's going to give you that same data for the whole state of Missouri. So it kind of gives you a comparison of how our graduates are prepared for college compared to those at the state. Now, when you look at that, it's important to keep in mind that we send about 80% of our students to college. The average district in the state of Missouri is only sending about 60% of their students to college. And so because we have a larger percentage of our student body going to a college, we would assume that more of those kids might need some help. And again, this is only Missouri public institutions. So kids who are going to private or out-of-state schools, none of that data is in here. I would also mention that in an effort to keep this to one slide, we were only able to give you 2 years of data. But if we were to give you all of the years on one slide, you would see that these 2020 graduates, they were the class needing the least amount of remediation to date. So this just continues to trend in the right direction, which is great news. This is another piece of data, kind of same story. It's about Missouri public colleges and universities. The Department of Higher Ed shares it with us. And this shows how many of our students are graduating college within 6 years. And so, you know, because we're looking at that 6-year graduation rate, the most recent year you'll see is 2014. But really what this chart highlights is that 64% of Francis Howell graduates complete their college degree within 6 years, compared to the state average of 52%. So just another celebration there. Attendance is another one of the standards for APR. With MSIP 5, we had to change the way we looked at attendance rates, and we started looking at our 90-90 attendance, which is DESE's expectation that 90% of our students were at school 90% of the time. Now, given that we are in the midst of a global pandemic, what they told us is that we're not going to hold you accountable in terms of APR for your attendance, but they did go ahead and report it out to everyone. So we felt like it was only fair to go ahead and share it with you as well, but we all know that, you know, when kids were in quarantine last year, they were counted absent, and so it's not really a shock that our attendance took a little bit of a hit last school year. I will mention here that this is the last year for MSIP 5, so when I come to you next year, we'll be talking about MSIP 6. We're still in the process of understanding and learning about it. We just get new emails each week about it. And we do know that attendance will be figured differently and count differently in MSIP 6. So we also know that this year's attendance, as we understand it today, we don't believe it'll be used for APR for accountability in MSIP 6 for next year, which is great news, all things considered at the moment. And then graduation rate is another area of APR that we're graded on. And what's interesting here is that we earn points based on the percentage of our kids graduating not only in 4 years, but also in 5 years. And so this last data point that I'll share with you tonight in this slide shows both our 4-year and our 5-year high school graduation rate. So if you look at the 2017 column and then the 4-year grad rate row, you'll see that 95.7% of our students graduated in 4 years. And then if you follow that shaded box down on a diagonal, you'll see that we picked up an additional 1% of that class in a 5th year, which really just means that there was a small group of kids who needed an extra semester or two to fulfill some of those graduation requirements to earn that diploma. Now, if you were to look, and still in that top chart, excuse me, it's not COVID. If you were to look at the Francis Howell data, still in that top chart for 2020, you'd see that we had 95% of our students graduate in 4 years. And then again, if you follow that diagonal down, that bumped up to almost 90% of our students had graduated by the end of the 5th year. And that compares in the bottom chart with the state average of 89% bumping up to 91%. So just a huge celebration there. We watch our dropout numbers on a monthly basis. When a student drops out, their high school counselor, their administrator, they send that information over to Rob Goff. He's our principal at Union High. And Rob and his team then, they start what we call the recovery process. And they make phone calls to the home, they make visits to the home, they start sending information home about the different programs that a kid could get involved with. You know, is Union the right option? Is Missouri Options the right option? How can we help you graduate so that you are more prepared for whatever's going to come next in your life? And so it's just important work there. And then Rob comes every month to our academic team meetings and goes line by line through every kid that's dropped out and kind of gives us an update on each of those individual students and the efforts being put forth to help bring them back. And then just as we wrap up, I would tell you that anytime we look at data, we're always having those conversations around so what, now what, and thinking about how are we going to grow, how are we going to do better for our students. And that happens every year at the buildings when they develop their annual improvement plans. It happens every year at the district level when we develop our annual improvement plans. And all of the schools, while what I have up here is pretty ACT focused, all of the schools really are spending time and energy talking about developing plans for, well, high schools anyway, AP classes and maintaining those high graduation rates and being mindful of COVID, but how are we promoting those strong attendance programs and making sure that families understand the importance of scheduling those orthodontist appointments outside the school day, because we really do need your kids here when we're in school. As you probably remember from previous years, most of the next steps are going to come next month tied to the academic data. But just a couple things I can highlight that we're working on right now. You know, continuing to spend time analyzing that graduate ACT data and then working to provide those content-specific strategies to teachers. We've already engaged in several different conversations with our building principals about, you know, when the time is right to start reinstating some of those ACT support programs. Let's not just put them all back in place, but let's take a minute to reevaluate which ones were highly effective, which ones do we need to tweak a little bit, what do we need to start that maybe we haven't done in the past. And then leaning into core or more. It's a list of courses that ACT has outlined that basically just indicates that a kid is more likely to be successful in college and do well on the ACT if they take these classes. And then how can we leverage that a little bit on our end? So through course advising kids what classes to take, planning those 4 years out. Are there implications for curriculum development that we haven't considered yet? So just kind of leaning into that a little bit. And then just to wrap up tonight, I would just offer that, there's so much to celebrate in our school community right now when you look at this data. Our staff continue to exceed expectations in so many areas. Our students continue to show up and give us their best each day. Our families continue to send us the best that they have each day. I would tell you, as a mom of 2 kids that are coming to our classrooms every day, it truly takes a village to make this possible. And so I just want to close that, there's always room for growth, there's always room for improvement, but we are super proud of the success and the accomplishments of our village, especially knowing that this is what came out of COVID. And we're excited to talk with you next month about the academic part of all of that data as well, and share a little bit with you about MSIP 6 to give you a little bit of a preview of what's to come. So David and I are happy to answer. I'm going to let him answer all the questions since I did all the talking. We're happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Board, any questions, comments?
Oh.
I think it's page 10, the AP data, percentage of students and exam scoring 3+. It's on. Just get closer. Okay. Percentage of students taking exams scoring 3 or higher. We have 72% exam, 74% with success, but the students that are not, that 26%, some of those students chose not to take the exam. Are those students included in the percentage that did not score a 3?
No. So these are students that actually sat for the exam.
They actually took the exam,
Yes.
and that's the percent that passed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is the secret to go last and then you're just too tired to ask any questions?
Yeah.
It's midnight. Anything else, board? Fabulous update. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have superintendent comments.
All right, given the time, I'll be pretty quick. I just have one celebration I'd like to share. So the Francis Howell Central Women's Choral Vocal Ensemble has been selected to perform at the Missouri Music Educators Association Conference. This is one of the highest honors an ensemble can receive. It's just an amazing experience, and for them to get chosen to do that is just fantastic. So last night, knowing that the actual performance is going to be down at the lake next week, they did a preview concert here at Francis Howell Central so people could come see them who can't travel to the lake. So I had the honor last night of getting to go and enjoy that show, and just what an amazing group of young women, and Miss Baird, the show that they put on is made us very proud last night, and I am positive will make us very proud next week down at the lake.
Board, any comments or requests?
I'll make it real quick. Thank the 4 people that are still in attendance. The non-employees, I should say. Non-employees. So thank you for being here. Thank you for staying to the end of the meeting. And I also want to point out, in reference to our substitute shortage, we have a number of people in our admin building that are subbing and taking several days out of their week to sub in our schools to make sure that our kids get the proper education they need, and they're also still doing their work, regular work on top of that. So I know there's a number of people in admin that have been doing that throughout, and that, so thank all the people that have been doing that, and we really do appreciate it.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, board, I would like a motion to return back to closed to finish our closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?